Romantic Tales. Chapter 519. When the two entered the courtyard of the post house, they encountered Lei Tingfeng. Perhaps because of what had happened a few days ago, Lei Tingfeng's expression was not very good. Seeing Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao come in hand, he first stilled before going forward to greet them. Prince Ding, Princess Ding, you are. Yi Li did not avoid the greeting and said with a generous smile, so it is Shitzi. We came a few days earlier than Shitzi and went out with the prince to walk around and experience the customs of Nanzhao. This trip was not in vain. Daisy. I see that Shitzi's expression is not very good. Did you just get to Nanzhao and had a bumpy journey? Yi Li's words were very sincere. Even Lei Tingfeng could not tell if Yi Li's words were sincere or if she was rejoicing in his misfortune. After all, although the matter of him encountering bandits on the road was known by everyone in Nanzhao Imperial City, Princess Ding had also said that she and Prince Ding had just returned from outside. Looking at Mo Xiuyao standing behind Yi Li, Lei Tingfeng's mind suddenly moved. He smiled faintly and said, "Many thanks for Wang Fei's concern. Where did Prince Ding and Wang Fei go to play? After Princess Anxi's wedding, this one will have some free time to go out." Yi Li said with a smile. The prince said that Nanzhao has a snake valley. Inside there are thousands of poisonous snakes and fiery red and beautiful flowers. I was curious and followed the prince to see what was going on. I have embarrassed myself in front of Shitzi. Lei Tingfeng frowned slightly. The Snake Valley and the road where he had been attacked were in the east and the west. They were not on the same road. In reality, Lei Tingfeng did not suspect Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao too much. After all, the news of him going to the southern border Holy Land was very secretive. It could even be said that it was an impromptu decision. It was impossible for Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li to have known beforehand that they were waiting for him on the road. It was just that the force that had struck him at the end was too strong. There weren't many people in the world who could do that. Now that he saw Mo Xiuyao, he couldn't help but want to test him. Lei Tingfeng smiled and said, "If that's the case, then it's indeed a rare and beautiful place. Later on I must go and enjoy it. Prince and Princess Consort have just returned and must be tired. This one will not disturb you any longer. Please excuse me." Yi Li nodded and smiled. "Take care, Shitzi." When they returned to the courtyard that Princess Anxi had arranged for them, Su Qingchen was already waiting for them. Young Master Qingchen was dressed in white. He was sitting at the stone table under the tree, leisurely brewing tea. He glanced at the two of them casually, which made Yi Li feel guilty for no reason. Yi Li felt guilty, but Mo Xiuyao did not know what guilt was. He pulled Yi Li to the table and sat down without hesitation. Su Qingchen poured a cup of tea for each of them and said with a faint smile, "Prince and Princess Consort, did you enjoy your trip?" "It was all right. The time was too short," Mo Xiuyao said coolly. The corner of Su Qingchen's mouth twitched imperceptibly. He glanced coolly at Yi Li. Yi Li pulled Mo Xiuyao guiltily. They had suddenly left. All the social matters in the palace had been left to eldest brother. It was normal for eldest brother to be angry. Mo Xiuyao snorted softly. He looked at Su Qingchen and casually told him what he had seen in the southern border Holy Land. After Su Qingchen heard this, an expression that did not belong to young Master Qingchen finally appeared on his handsome face. Su Qingchen's expression was unusually dark. He gritted his teeth and said, "Prince is telling me that after you found such an important matter, you did not come back to deal with it, but took Princess Consort in a circle and then continued on your trip?" Mo Xiuyao looked innocently at him. "What is wrong?" He looked at Yi Li with a wronged expression. "Your brother is unreasonable." Yi Li rolled her eyes at the sky. Su Qingchen's anger had not subsided. "Do you have a brain? No one knows how many experts there are in the southern border Holy Land and how dangerous it is. You dare to take Li Er in charge in? If you want to die, don't drag Li Er with you." Mo Xiuyao said, "There's no one inside. Li and I went in and pretended to be there. No one discovered us when we came out." Su Qingchen smiled coldly. "That's because your luck is good. The day you left, Shu Manlin secretly sent hundreds of first-class experts into Imperial City." Mo Xiuyao nodded in agreement. "And I's luck has always been very good." Seeing Su Qingchen's expression change again, Yi Li hurriedly poured a cup of tea for him. "Eldest brother, calm down. Prince." She glanced warningly at Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao twisted his mouth in dissatisfaction. Li was the most biased. Looking at the two men who didn't like each other, Yili sighed helplessly. She didn't count on Emo Xiuyao anymore. She told them everything that had happened. Hearing Yili mention the hidden luo flower, Su Qingchen couldn't be bothered to be angry with Emo Xiuyao anymore. His handsome brows furrowed as he said in a low voice, Emo Jingli wants to give that to the emperor? Yili nodded and said, I think so. In these years Emo Jingqi and his brother seem to be in harmony, but in reality, they've been fighting both openly and secretly. Emo Jingli sits on the richest half of Dechu State's southern territory. How could he be willing to be under one person? He probably can't wait. Su Qingchen laughed coldly, idiot. The southern border people clearly don't have good intentions. Does Emo Jingli think that by using this method to kill Emo Jingqi, Shu Manlin won't have something that can be used against him? The Dechu state was different from the southern border. It paid the most attention to propriety, righteousness, honor, loyalty, filial piety and righteousness. Once the news of Emo Jingli murdering his elder brother the emperor spread, he might as well start a rebellion if he wanted to sit on the throne. When the Nanzhao people have something that can be used against him, Emo Jingli would just be a puppet. Shu Manlin has a good plan. Does Big Brother have news of Tan Jiji? Yili said with a faint smile. Su Qingchen nodded and said, I have some understanding of Shu Manlin. She doesn't have the brains. It must be Tan Jiji who gave her the idea behind the scenes. Getting rid of Princess Anqi and obtaining Nanzhao, then controlling Emo Jingli from behind the scenes to control the Dechu state, it really is a good idea. It's just that his thinking is a bit too smooth. Yili looked at Emo Xiuyao and asked, Xiuyao, what do you think? Emo Xiuyao leaned against the tree behind him and said with a lazy smile, what can I think? What does the brothers fighting for the throne have to do with us outsiders? In this way he didn't care. Su Qingchen sighed softly. Emo Xiuyao and the Dechu state's imperial family had a deep hatred. Many people were secretly surprised that Emo Xiuyao didn't send out troops from the start. He naturally couldn't save Emo Jingqi. Emo Jingqi had been guarding the Prince Ding mansion against Emo Xuan and Emo Xiuyao ever since the registration. He probably didn't expect that the person who wanted his life the most was his biological younger brother. Thinking about it, Su Qingchen nodded and said, fine, it's right for us to ignore this matter. The Northwest had already broken off relations with the Dechu state. Then it was best for them to not participate in the Dechu state's affairs. Although they were at peace now, everyone knew that there would be a day when the Dechu state and the Northwest would fight. If the Northwest interfered in the Dechu state's internal affairs during this time, it would be bad for the reputation of Prince Ding and the Mahist army. Shu Manlin probably has big plans this time. Thinking of the hundreds of experts that Shu Manlin had transferred from the sacred land of Nanjiang, Su Qingchen frowned and said, those who could live in the sacred land of Nanjiang were definitely top experts. More importantly, the people of Nanzhao were good at using poisonous goo. This made them even more dangerous. Because of this, the people of the Central Plains didn't like to interact with the people of Nanjiang. They didn't bring mini guards this time. If something really happened, it would be very troublesome. Emo Xiuyao smiled and said, I'm afraid Princess Anqi isn't easy to deal with. With young Master Qingchen's secret guidance, she'll be even more powerful. Princess Anqi was able to fight against Shu Manlin for so many years under the protection of the king of Nanzhao and still remain undefeated. Naturally, she wasn't someone who could be easily bullied. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and nodded. Princess Anqi told me that Pu Ah and her grandfather's tribe sent many experts. And over the years she has many loyal death warriors under her. But this wedding... a good wedding would inevitably be stained with blood. Emo Xiuyao said, the people of Nanzhao don't believe in this. I'm sure they won't mind. Su Qingchen was helpless. Was this a matter of whether they minded or not? No one would be happy to see a bloodbath at their wedding. Yili put her elbow on the table and said thoughtfully, could it be that Princess Anqi held this wedding to deal with Shu Manlin? Su Qingchen was startled. What do you mean? Yili shook her head and said, I don't know. I just think that Princess Anqi's wedding came too suddenly. And she even secretly invited experts to help. If Princess Anqi was not a clairvoyant, then she must have deliberately set a trap for Shu Manlin to turn inside. But this doesn't make sense. After all, the king of Nanzhao is still here. Even if Princess Anqi wins, she can't kill Shu Manlin. Emo Xiuyao smiled and said, I'm afraid that Princess Anqi was forced by Shu Manlin and the king of Nanzhao and had to take the risk. Have you noticed that the king of Nanzhao's attitude towards Pu A can be said to be completely ignored? That is to say, the king of Nanzhao doesn't really agree with this wedding. In his heart, I'm afraid that the king of Nanzhao wants to depose Princess Anxi. The king of Nanzhao has no other children. To depose Princess Anxi, Mo Xiuyao smiled and said, of course it's Xu Manlin. The saintess of Nanjiang has a unique status in Nanzhao. In history there have been cases where the saintess of Nanjiang temporarily took over the throne, although it was only for a very short period of time. And in recent years Xu Manlin has been respected as the savior of Nanzhao. The restrictions she has been subjected to are far less than the previous saintesses. Can be said that there are almost no restrictions. In recent years her influence in the court has gradually been able to compete with Princess Anxi's. In this case, it's not impossible to persuade the king of Nanzhao to appoint another crown princess. Yili sighed helplessly. Just listening to the struggles for power in the royal family made her feel tired. It was hard for a girl like Princess Anxi to be able to persevere in such a situation. What does the prince mean? Mo Xiuyao smiled faintly and said, the crown princess can't be deposed, and the saintess of Nanjiang can't die. Su Qingchen was silent. Mo Xiuyao wanted to keep them to continue fighting in case the Nanzhao started other things when they were free. After all, the Nanzhao people were eyeing the Central Plains covetously. Even if the Dechu state had nothing to do with the Mahist army now, they couldn't let the Nanzhao covet it. Chapter 520. Reporting to Princess Changel, noble consort Lu of the Dechu state, requests an audience. An imperial bodyguard came in to report. Whenever Yili thought of noble consort Lu, she felt uncomfortable. It wasn't that she didn't believe in Mo Xiuyao's feelings for her. Rather, it was that a fly was always flying in front of you, yet you couldn't slap her to death. It always made one feel uncomfortable. For the first time, Yili discovered that Su Zuidi and Yi Ying, whom she originally hated the most, were nothing in front of this woman. Su Zuidi was only narcissistic and vain. Yi Ying was only opinionated and had a bit of selfishness that everyone had. Compared to noble consort Lu's pestering, these were nothing. Mo Xiuyao had treated her so rudely, yet she still came to visit. Yili didn't know where she got her mental fortitude from. Although it was said that only stupid women dealt with other women, smart women dealt with men. Against someone like noble consort Lu, no matter how well-behaved a man was, it was useless. Seeing Yili's unsightly expression, Mo Xiuyao became happy. Yili glanced at him and said indifferently, Prince is so happy. In that case, Prince should go see noble consort Lu himself. Su Qingchen nodded and said, Li is right. I saw that noble consort Lu received news of your return and made a special trip over. She most likely didn't come to see Li. Don't waste your energy. Li must be tired these past few days. Go back to your room and rest. Hearing this, Mo Xiuyao glared at Su Qingchen with resentment. His hands rested on Yili's body, unwilling to let go. Don't go. Su Qingchen speechlessly looked at the increasingly childish man and helpless little sister in front of her. She stood up and left. Even though she knew that Mo Xiuyao was acting, Li couldn't bear to part with him. What could he do? He didn't feel like sitting there and being an eyesore. As the saying goes, even an honest and upright official would find it difficult to resolve a family dispute. Those two people, one was willing to hit while the other was willing to be hit. It really had nothing to do with him. Young Master Qingchen sighed helplessly as he turned around to look at the two people who were sitting together. Young Master Qingchen, who had not been troubled by love for half of his life, could not understand this kind of mutual affection. What is love? How would this young master know? Mo Xiuyao accompanied Yili for a long time to coax his wife. He silently remembered that in the future, even if he felt proud because Ali cared about him, he must not show it in front of Ali, otherwise, Ali would be shy. The guards in the yard were used to seeing their prince fawning over the princess consort without caring about his image. Young Master Fengsan was right. It was normal to be henpecked. By the time noble consort Lu and Princess Changel were invited inside, their complexions were quite unsightly. Prince Ding's ability to coax people was not good enough. As a result, noble consort Lu had to wait for nearly an hour before she was allowed to enter. When Princess Changel saw Yili's smile, she winked at her. Yili smiled faintly and nodded her head. Extending her hand, she beckoned Princess Changel over to sit. Princess Changle bluntly walked over to Yi Li's side and sat down. Laughing softly, she asked, Princess Ding, did you and royal uncle go out to play? Yesterday I wanted to find you to play, but young Master Feng San said that you were not here. Yi Li nodded her head and replied with a smile, I have indeed not been here these past few days. Did Princess just arrive yesterday? Princess Changle nodded her head and said, You all walked so quickly. Our carriage couldn't keep up with you. Noble consort Lu walked over. Looking at Yi Li and Emo Shuyao, she asked, Has the prince been well these past few days? Emo Shuyao leaned against Yi Li, paying no attention to her words. Noble consort Lu could not help but change her expression. Clenching her teeth, she continued, Princess consort, I have something to discuss with the prince. Would it be possible for me to leave for a moment? Yi Li raised her eyes and glanced at noble consort Lu before lowering her head to look at Emo Shuyao, who was leaning against her. Emo Shuyao raised his head and gazed pitifully at her. His pair of dark eyes appeared particularly bright under his snow-white hair. Wife, your husband has not spoken with her. Don't leave me behind. Seated to the side, Princess Changle could not help but burst out in laughter. She nearly choked on the tea she had just swallowed and could only cough incessantly. Princess consort. Uncle Prince Ding. Princess Changle truly did not know what to say. In her mind, Uncle Prince Ding had always been wise, mighty, and unapproachable. However, was this person who was gazing pitifully at Princess Ding really the awe-inspiring Uncle Prince Ding? Yi Li helplessly rolled her eyes at Emo Shuyao. To Princess Changle she said, He's gone crazy. Don't pay attention to him. Emo Shuyao was displeased. His handsome face rubbed against Yi Li's body. Wife, this woman harbors ill intentions towards your husband. You have to protect me. Good boy. Yi Li reached out and patted him, speaking perfunctorily. Raising her head to look at noble consort Lu, Yi Li sternly stated, Noble consort, you've frightened our prince. Noble consort Lu's beautiful face instantly distorted. Forcing a smile, she replied, Miss, Yi must be joking. The prince is unparalleled in wisdom and courage. How could he be frightened by me? Yi Li indifferently replied, That's not necessarily true. Clingy women are the most frightening. Our prince has always been most afraid of those shameless women. Take a look and see if he's frightened. Emo Shuyao repeatedly nodded his head. Although his face could not be seen, his unhesitatingly nodding his head caused noble consort Lu to lose all face. Yi Li. Noble consort Lu finally could not bear it any longer. She did her best to maintain her good manners as she sternly shouted. However, before she could say anything, a cold and gloomy gaze interrupted her words. Emo Shuyao leaned his head against Yi Li's shoulder and turned his face. His silver hair covered most of his face, but his eyes, carrying a sinister and ruthless aura that seemed to have come from the depths of hell, stared straight at noble consort Lu. Noble consort Lu had always hoped that this man would look her in the eye. At that time, when Emo Shuyao's gaze truly landed on her body, she felt as if her entire body had been frozen. Even though the fear in her heart had nearly taken over her entire being, she was so stiff that she did not even dare to move. That pair of deep, handsome eyes carried an unprecedented killing intent. Noble consort Lu even suspected that her eyes were playing tricks on her, that she had seen a flash of blood in Emo Shuyao's eyes. Since the prince has matters to attend to, I will take my leave first. Finished speaking, noble consort Lu walked out of the courtyard without the slightest hesitation, as if an evil spirit were chasing after her. She even forgot to call Princess Changle to return with her. Yi Li and Princess Changle looked at each other in dismay. They did not understand why noble consort Lu, who had previously refused to leave, would suddenly run away as if she had seen a ghost. Prince, what did you do? Yi Li asked, raising her eyebrows. Emo Shuyao innocently blinked his eyes. How could I do anything to her? Princess Li, have a good chat with Changle. I'll go find Feng Jiao and have a drink together. Yi Li knew that he was looking for Feng Jiao. Nodding her head, she watched as he rose and left. Only after Emo Shuyao had left did Princess Changle put down the teacup she had been holding. Leaning over the table, she began to giggle. Looking at her helplessly, Yi Li asked, Is it really that funny? Princess Changle's eyes curved into crescents as she laughed. Raising her head to look at Yi Li, she stated, Of course it's funny. If it weren't for the fact that the princess consort is also here, I truly wouldn't dare to believe that this is Uncle Ding. Before I left, Imperial Father didn't allow me to see Imperial Mother. I know. At this point, the girl who was trying her best to hide her emotions with a smile finally couldn't hold back her tears. Thinking back to the last time she had seen her Imperial Mother, the apologetic expression on her mother's face, Princess Changle could not stop her eyes from brimming with tears. Yili understood. Mo Jingqi's actions were not just for the marriage alliance with Nanzhao, but to use this to humiliate the Empress and the Hua family. However, no matter how dissatisfied Mo Jingqi was with the Empress and the Hua family, could it be that he had forgotten that Changle was his own flesh and blood? Looking at the dainty young girl before her, Yili sighed softly. She asked, "Do you truly intend to follow your Imperial Father's arrangements? Although I don't have a daughter, I still have children. If a child were to encounter such a situation, how heartbroken would a mother be? Let's not talk about your Imperial Father but your Imperial Mother. If you were truly to be gifted to the King of Nanzhao, I fear that your Imperial Mother would feel guilty for the rest of her life." Princess Changle raised her hand to wipe away her tears. Choking with sobs, she replied, "In the past I told Princess that if the Dechu state needed a political marriage in the future as a princess, I would naturally not shirk my duty. Only now do I know. The so-called responsibility of a princess was nothing more than my own self-righteousness. Imperial Father simply did not need me, his daughter, to help him forge a political marriage and strengthen the friendship between the two countries. All he wanted was to see his maternal grandfather, the Empress Dowager, and his Imperial Mother unhappy. He wanted to embarrass the Hua family. That day, when Imperial Mother went to speak to Imperial Father about my marriage, I heard it from outside the door. Imperial Father said that he would not allow me to marry openly, nor would he allow me to remain in the Chu capital. Given my status, if I were to marry into another country, at the very least, I would be the official consort of a prince. He said that in the future, if I were to side with outsiders, I would definitely help others deal with him. If I were to marry into the Chu capital, I would definitely rope in my husband's family to help the Hua family make things difficult for him. As a result, he wanted to send me to Nanzhao, making it so that I would never be the Empress of Nanzhao and could only be a lowly consort." Hearing Princess Changle's words, Yili could not help but want to give Mo Jingqi a vicious beating. Sighing, she asked, "Princess, should I have someone escort you out of here?" Shaking her head, Princess Changle replied, "Many thanks to Princess, but there is no need for this. Since Changle has promised Imperial Father to come to Nanzhao, I will not escape midway. I only ask that Princess, if there is an opportunity in the future, take care of my Imperial Mother and the Hua family." Yili wanted to continue persuading Princess Changle, but an Imperial bodyguard came to report that a palace made from the Dechu state had come looking for Princess Changle. Presumably, noble consort Lu had left in a panic and returned to her courtyard only to discover that Princess Changle was still here. Thus she had sent someone to search for her. Standing up, Princess Changle smiled and said, "Princess, I will be leaving first." "Right, you must be careful of noble consort Lu. That woman is extremely crazy." Yili nodded. In a low voice she instructed, "Be careful. If there is anything you need help with, send someone to inform me." "Many thanks, Princess. Farewell." In a day or two, it would be Princess Anqi's wedding. The commoners of Nanzhao treated this crown princess with great respect. The entire Nanzhao royal city was bustling with noise and excitement. Many commoners of Nanzhao had specially made their way to the royal city to participate in this grand occasion. In a tea house that was obviously owned by people from the Dechu state, Yili sat by the window leisurely sipping tea. Mo Shuyao leaned back in his chair, coldly looking at the two irksome men across from him. "Why have you two appeared here?" Han Mingshi gracefully took a sip of the fine wine in his cup. With a languid expression, he smiled wholeheartedly. "Prince, what are you saying? Princess Anqi's wedding is no small matter. This one is a merchant. Merchants pursue profit. Why can't this one be here?" Mo Shuyao narrowed his eyes dangerously. Coldly he stated, "Since that is the case, you should go about your business. Why have you come looking for us?" Han Mingshi set down his cup. Sincerely he replied, "Prince, you have misunderstood. This subordinate has not come looking for you. The one this subordinate seeks an audience with is the princess. You came of your own accord." "How?" Sitting next to Han Mingshi was really young Master Mingyu Han Mingyue. Even though he no longer had the demeanor of young Master Mingyu, It was clear that Han Mingxi had taken good care of his older brother these past few years. Han Mingyue's brows seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life, but he was still in good spirits. Seeing Emo Xiaoyao's expression change, Han Mingyue couldn't help but smile. Worried that Emo Xiaoyao would take his anger out on his younger brother, he said, "It's been so many years. It's rare to see Prince's expression change." Even though Han Mingyue had been living in Li City these past few years and Su Zuidi was no longer alive, the friendship between them could not be broken. But the brotherhood from before couldn't go back, so Han Mingyue didn't pretend that nothing had happened and directly called Emo Xiaoyao's name. Prince. This form of address indicated their current relationship and distance. Han Mingxi snorted softly and raised his eyebrows. Didn't Prince often change his expression? Was that why his older brother was unable to see through people? Alright Mingxi, why did you make a trip to Nanzhao? Seeing that Emo Xiaoyao was really about to explode, Yili hurriedly interrupted. Han Mingxi's expression changed and he nodded. That's right. After I sent Yaoji back to the Chu capital, I met with Leng Haoyu. It was he who wanted me to pass a message to the prince and the princess. Seeing Han Mingxi like this, Emo Xiaoyao and Yili knew that it must be an extremely important matter. Otherwise, Leng Haoyu would not have asked Han Mingxi to pass the message instead of directly sending someone to deliver it to Li City. Yili frowned slightly and said, "What happened to the Chu capital?" Han Mingxi shook his head and said, "Nothing happened to the Chu capital, but I'm afraid that something will happen to Emo Jingqi." Emo Xiaoyao snorted disdainfully. Was it strange that something would happen to Emo Jingqi? Even his own younger brother wanted to kill him. Could be seen how much he wanted to anger the heavens and people. It would be strange if nothing happened. Han Mingxi looked at the two's expressions and understood. He said with a smile, "It seems that it's not just one group that wants to deal with Emo Jingqi. Could it be that the prince also knows something? Let me think. Is it Emo Jingli?" Yili did not answer and asked with a smile, "The one you want to talk about is not Emo Jingli?" Han Mingxi said with a smile, "Of course not, it's the Lu family." The Lu family? Yili was surprised. Although they had guessed that the Lu family was very ambitious, why did they want to deal with Emo Jingqi? At present, the Lu family that Emo Jingqi trusted the most and favored noble consort Lu the most. What benefit could they get from dealing with Emo Jingqi? Emo Xiaoyao frowned slightly and quickly reacted. He asked, "The Lu family wants to help noble consort Lu's imperial son ascend the throne?" A trace of admiration flashed through Han Mingxi's eyes. He nodded and said, "Correct. Speaking of which, Emo Jingqi's luck is not bad." Originally, the Lu family had planned to act soon. After taking over Emo Jingqi, they suddenly sent Prime Minister Lu to Nanzhao. This caused the Lu family to panic for a while and only then did our people see the clues. Otherwise, the news we received might have been that the Dechu state had a new emperor and that Emo Jingqi had died. Yili couldn't help but rub her forehead. How did Emo Jingqi make himself so isolated? Emo Xiaoyao was unmoved. How is this important news? Does Leng Haoyu have nothing better to do? What did it have to do with him whether Emo Jingqi died or not? The more miserable Emo Jingqi died, the happier he would be. Although it was a bit regretful that he didn't do it himself, he didn't mind if someone else was willing to do it for him. Han Mingxi rolled his eyes. If that's the case, naturally no one would care about this matter. However, Leng Haoyu said that this matter wasn't just the work of the Lu family. It seems that the northern tribes and some tribes in the north are also involved. I'm afraid that the day Emo Jingqi dies is the day these people enter the Dechu state. The northern tribes and the tribes in the north are all involved? Han Mingxi nodded. Otherwise, with the Lu family's ability, how could they have the courage to usurp the throne without the support of others? Yili frowned. In a low voice she said, "Princess Chang'e is likely to be in danger." Emo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "Someone wants to drive a wedge between Emo Jingqi and the Hua family. Naturally, it is best to start with Princess Chang'e." Chapter 522. Nanzhao's wedding was very different from that of the Central Plains. Princess Anxi and Pu'ei's wedding was held in the square in front of the palace. Not only the nobles and envoys of Nanjiang, but also the common people of Nanzhao gathered in the square to celebrate the princess's wedding. Although the northwest was not big and was not even a real country, Nanzhao still arranged for Emo Xiaoyao and Yili to sit closest to the king of Nanzhao and the newlyweds. Even the envoys of Dechu State and West Hill had to sit behind them. Although Prime Minister Liu was unhappy because of this, he was not a reckless man. Naturally, he would not confront Emo Shuyao because of this. Lei Tingfeng's face was still gloomy and his eyebrows were tightly knitted. Obviously, he was very worried about being robbed and losing the medicine he had just obtained. However, this time Genom King of Gojoseon did not come with him because he wanted his son to be independent. Therefore, Lei Tingfeng could not find anyone to discuss with. Princess Anqi was wearing a snow-white dress embroidered with delicate blue patterns. She was sitting next to the groom. She usually looked valiant, but now she looked more beautiful. Shu Manlin was wearing a saintess's yellow robe and exquisite makeup. She was sitting next to the king of Nanzhao with a smile, but she seemed to be more dazzling than the bride. If it were not for noble consort Liu, who was even more beautiful and cold, most people's eyes would have fallen on her. Feng Jiao was sitting behind Yi Li and Emo Shuyao. He looked at the women present and teased, "Oh princess, you seem to have been defeated." Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled faintly. She did not answer. She didn't want to steal the bride's attention. Emo Shuyao looked down at his wife beside him. She was wearing a light blue robe and her hair was in a simple and neat bun with 2 blue jade hairpins. She looked elegant and graceful. Under the moonlight and the lights, her eyes looked even more beautiful and charming. In Ai's eyes, Miss Li is the most beautiful. Yi Li looked at him with a smile and said, "Master Prince Ding, no matter how well you say it, I won't forget that you still have a confidant who is eagerly waiting for you." Emo Shuyao, of course, also sensed a certain someone's gaze. He snorted disdainfully and said, "If Lili doesn't like it, I'll just get someone to dig out that pair of eyes. What do I need eyeballs for? Do you want to eat?" Yi Li rolled her eyes. Emo Shuyao seriously considered for a moment, then said, "It doesn't taste good, feed it to Emo Xiaobao." Yi Li was completely speechless. It didn't taste good, so she fed it to Emo Xiaobao. Was that what he meant? Was Emo Xiaobao really someone he had picked up from the outside? She glared fiercely at Emo Shuyao. "If you don't want to feed Emo Xiaobao, how about feeding Debao?" Emo Shuyao blinked and understood who the Debao in Yi Li's mouth was. Frowning, he said, "I don't want to eat it." Behind them, Feng Jiao was sweating profusely. How cheap was his mouth to be so talkative? Also, how capable were the 2 people in front of them to be able to deviate from the topic to such an extent? Please don't discuss such a cruel topic at someone else's wedding, okay? If Princess Anqi's marriage is unlucky in the future, it will definitely be because of you too. Princess Consort. Princess Changel doesn't seem to have appeared. Finally, Feng Jiao could not stand the increasingly cruel conversation and spoke up to remind her. Yi Li looked towards the table of the emissaries from the Dechu state. Sure enough, she did not see Princess Anqi. Instead, she saw noble consort Liu, who had been staring fixedly at Emo Shuyao, reveal a strange smile. Yi Li frowned in thought. Turning her head, she gave Feng Jiao a few instructions in a low voice. Feng Jiao's expression changed slightly. Finally, while no one was paying attention, he stealthily withdrew from the plaza. Feng Jiao's stealthy withdrawal did not affect anyone. Emo Shuyao and Yi Li continued to chat and laugh in low voices. Although the 2 of them had no intention of competing with the newlyweds for attention, the gazes on them did not lessen at all. Emo Shuyao inadvertently looked towards the opposite side, just in time to see Emo Jingli staring at him in a daze, as well as Lei Tingfeng's pensive expression. A cold light flashed through his eyes. He snorted softly and smiled mockingly at Emo Jingli. Emo Jingli naturally saw the cold smile on Emo Shuyao's face. However, he did not feel the embarrassment of being caught peeping at someone else's wife. Instead, he proudly glared at Emo Shuyao. Emo Shuyao raised the wine cup in his hand and silently said, "I wish you all the best." Although Emo Jingli had always disliked Emo Shuyao, he still paid close attention to his every move. Naturally, he understood Emo Shuyao's meaning. At first, he did not take it to heart. However, when he saw the faint smile on Emo Shuyao's face, his heart couldn't help but tremble. He felt as if something had been seen through by Emo Shuyao. This feeling of his most secret being seen through by an enemy made Emo Jingli feel very uncomfortable. Naturally, he was not in the mood to look at Yi Li. After the king of Nanzhao personally held the wedding for Princess Anqi and Puaju, he returned to the palace early. Then the entire square became a sea of joy. Everyone, including Princess Anqi and her new husband, sang and danced happily. Amidst this joy, Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao sat in the most inconspicuous corner and watched everything in front of them. The weddings in Nanjiang are not as formal as those in the Central Plains, but they are more lively, Yi Li said in a low voice with a laugh. Mo Xiuyao looked with interest at the people dancing and singing below. He asked, Miss Li, should we go down and have fun with them? Yi Li glanced coolly at him and said, if you like, go yourself. I don't know how to dance. Mo Xiuyao was slightly regretful but quickly thought better of it. Then never mind. I don't want to see Miss Li dance in front of others. Princess Consort. Shuijing appeared behind the two and whispered a few words into Yi Li's ear. Yi Li frowned. Raising her head, she said to Mo Xiuyao, something has happened with Chang'e. Let's go first. Although Mo Xiuyao was not very familiar with Princess Chang'e, she was still the daughter of Empress Hua. Moreover, Mo Xiuyao had a favorable impression of the little girl. She was completely different from her father. Nodding his head, Shuijing pulled Yi Li and prepared to leave. However, he was stopped by a voice behind him. Prince, are you going back so early? At some point, noble consort Lu had walked over. Even though the night was lit and the crowd was surging, noble consort Lu was still dressed in white. She was like the cold snow of a high mountain, stunning others yet not daring to approach her. Mo Xiuyao frowned. Indifferently, he asked, what does it have to do with you? Noble consort Lu smiled faintly and replied, right now the envoys from various countries are still present. For Prince Ding to leave early, isn't that disrespectful to the host? The three people present were the center of attention. With just a few words, Mo Jingli, Lei Tingfeng and the others' gazes all swept over. Yi Li frowned. Glancing at Mo Xiuyao, she said, noble consort Lu is right. Since this is the case, Prince, there is no need for you to accompany me back. I will go back by myself. Not only was there a problem with Princess Chang'e, but Princess Anqi also needed someone to watch over her. Chapter 523. Mo Xiuyao hesitated for a moment, already understanding Yi Li's intentions. However, he still pretended to be worried. Can you go back by yourself? Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded. Suspicious, noble consort Lu sized up Yi Li and asked, what's wrong, Miss Yi? Yi Li indifferently replied, there are too many people tonight. This consort is feeling a bit uncomfortable, that's all. Thank you for your concern, noble consort Lu. Is that so? Noble consort Lu declined to comment. However, it was clear that she was extremely happy that Yi Li had left alone. For once, she warmed her expression towards Yi Li, then Miss Yi should return early to rest. Yi Li was disinclined to pay attention to this woman who had a mental problem. Nodding to Mo Xiuyao, she left the plaza with Shuijing. Upon returning to the post house, just as she entered the courtyard, Feng Jiao hurriedly came out to welcome her. His expression was somewhat unsightly. Princess consort. What happened to Princess Chang'e? Yi Li asked. With a gloomy expression, Feng Jiao replied, Princess Chang'e has been sent to the palace. Yi Li frowned. When did this happen? Feng Jiao replied, when we went to participate in the wedding banquet, I was a step too late. Princess Chang'e had already been sent to the palace. With the spies that the Prince Ding mansion had placed in the Nanzhao palace, it was not impossible for them to bring Princess Chang'e out. However, the price of doing so would inevitably be exposing the spies of the Prince Ding mansion. Furthermore, bringing Princess Chang'e out would result in a series of troubles. This was not something that Feng Jiao could decide. Yi Li pondered for a moment before replying, the Prince of Nanzhao has just returned to the palace. According to Nanzhao's customs, if we enter the palace now, we might still be able to make it. A light flashed in Feng Jiao's eyes. Many thanks, Princess Consort. There were not many people who came to Nanzhao this time, but Yi Li only needed Feng Jiao, Qin Feng, Shuijing, Lin Han, and the two Qilin to enter the Nanzhao palace. The group bypassed the noisy square in front of the palace and snuck into the palace without alerting the palace guards. Previously, Feng Jiao had already investigated clearly. Princess Chang'e had been directly sent to the bedchamber of the Prince of Nanzhao. Therefore, as soon as they entered the palace, they went straight to the Nanzhao king's bedroom. However, just as they arrived outside the bedroom, they heard a commotion coming from inside. There's an assassin. Feng Jiao was shocked. Have we been discovered? Qin Feng shook his head and reached out to press down on Feng Zhiao, who was about to draw his sword. The defenses of the Nanzhao Palace are not that strong. With the exception of Feng Zhiao, they were all top-notch concealment experts. As long as they were careful at all times, it was impossible for the Nanzhao Palace's imperial bodyguards to discover them. Sure enough, the imperial bodyguards who had heard the news did not even glance in their direction. One after another they rushed into the bedroom. Immediately, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard from the bedroom. Yili raised her hand and gestured to the group behind her. The two Qi Lin Zhuojing and Lin Han split into two groups and ran towards the palace from the left and right. Very quickly, four shadows appeared on the roof of the bedroom. One of them gestured towards them. Before Feng Zhiao could react, he was grabbed by Qin Feng, who was beside him, and flew towards the roof of the opposite palace. By the time Feng Zhiao steadied himself with great difficulty, the four shadows had already disappeared without a trace. Helpless, Feng Zhiao said, "Brother Qin, my Qinggong is not bad. In addition, what did those gestures mean?" Although Feng Zhiao had some contact with the Qilin, he still didn't quite understand the way these people acted. Qin Feng indifferently replied, "Sign language." The princess consort wanted them to split into two groups to check the situation in front. They said that this side was safe. Feng Zhiao snorted disdainfully. Why go through so much trouble? Experts all directly charge in. If they rushed in like this to rescue someone, it would be too late. Qin Feng indifferently glanced at him. That's why experts die quickly. The princess consort said that although sacrifice is often unavoidable, the lives of ordinary soldiers are still lives. Even if it is unavoidable, it should be minimized. Feng Zhiao was startled, speechlessly rubbing his nose. Very quickly, another shadow appeared from under the eaves, making an extremely short gesture. Qin Feng stood up and said, "Let's go quickly. There aren't assassins inside. They should be people who came to rescue Princess Chang'e." By the time the two of them arrived at the innermost bedroom of the Nanzhao Palace, a fight was taking place in front of it. As far as the eye could see, Feng Zhiao could not see where the four people were hiding. At some unknown time, Yili had appeared beside the two. She asked, "Are those people from the Hua family down there?" Feng Zhiao's expression changed. Staring fixedly at the people fighting below, he replied, "It should be. Other than the Hua family, I cannot think of anyone else who would come to rescue Princess Chang'e. However, why did they wait until now to rescue her? No matter what, it was much more convenient to rescue someone on the road than in the Nanzhao Palace. Naturally, there is a reason why they can only rescue someone in the Nanzhao Palace," Yili replied. "Let's go in and take a look at Princess Chang'e. Qin Feng, watch this place." Qin Feng nodded. "Princess consort, please be at ease." It was naturally not easy to avoid the eyes and ears of so many imperial bodyguards and enter the bedroom. As a result, Yili did not do so. Instead, she led Feng Zhiao up the roof. After arriving at a certain location, she stopped. Pointing below, she said, "This is the bedroom of the king of Nanzhao." Yili quickly removed the glazed tiles from the roof, not making the slightest sound. Very quickly, everything within the bedroom fell into their eyes. Yili had chosen an excellent position. Looking down from above, she could see most of the bedroom. As for the people in the room, because they were blocked by the roof beams, unless they walked down to the hole, it would be very difficult for them to see that a hole had been opened in the roof. Feng Zhiao watched as Yili descended from the hole in the roof, silently standing on the roof beam. However, the people in the room were completely unaware of this. With a gloomy expression, the king of Nanzhao stared at Princess Chang'e, who was sitting on a soft couch not far away. His eyes flashed with lust and ruthless anger. This was the eldest princess of the first wife of the Dechu state. Although she was still young, she was already a young beauty. In 2 more years she would surpass his daughter, Princess Xixia, who had once been known as the #1 beauty of Nanzhao. Originally, it was not very likely that he would marry such a princess. In the history of the Dechu state, it was extremely rare for a princess to be given away for political purposes, especially a princess of the first wife. Although he did not know why the emperor of the Dechu state would give him such a noble princess, he was still extremely satisfied with this gift. Princess Chang'e sat on the soft couch, nervously staring at the tightly shut door to the palace hall. Her hands, hidden within her sleeves, were tightly gripped. The king of Nanzhao stared at her without blinking, completely ignoring the assassins outside the palace hall. Staring at Princess Changle's dainty appearance, he revealed an impatient and covetous expression. Truly a young beauty. The princesses of the Dechu state are indeed different from the rest. You don't need to worry about the assassins outside. Not to mention a mere dozen people. Even if there were 10 times as many people, it would be impossible for them to leave the Nanzhao palace alive. Princess Changle's body trembled, looking at the door in alarm. Finally, a trace of anxiety appeared on her face. Seeing the change in her expression, the king of Nanzhao became even more pleased. Ah, my young beauty, it's best that you obediently submit to I. As long as you are obedient, I can leave the corpses of those people outside intact. Princess Changle clenched her teeth. Suddenly she stood up and rushed towards the door. How could the king of Nanzhao allow her to rush out? Reaching out, he tightly grasped one of her arms. Young beauty, what are you in such a hurry for? Princess Changle struggled incessantly. However, how could a weak girl like her be a match for the king of Nanzhao? Her bound arm was unable to move at all, and her face revealed a pained expression. She decided to stop running. Raising her voice, she shouted, "No matter who is outside, I don't want you to save me. Quickly leave." The people fighting outside the palace hall clearly heard her voice. Immediately one of them shouted, "Princess, this subordinate will definitely save you. All of you leave. I don't want you to save me." Tears streamed down Princess Changle's clear eyes as she sternly shouted. Seeing the king of Nanzhao's complacent evil grin and his face close to hers, a trace of determination flashed across Princess Changle's dainty face. Suddenly, Princess Changle raised her still free right hand. A streak of cold light shot out from her sleeve. A dagger glittering with cold light appeared in Princess Changle's hand. Without the slightest hesitation, she stabbed towards the king of Nanzhao's hand. How could the king of Nanzhao allow her to stab him with a bayonet? Immediately he released his hand, causing Princess Changle to stab empty air. Not expecting that this delicate and weak girl before him would actually be so daring, the king of Nanzhao flew into a rage out of humiliation. He slapped Princess Changle across the face, causing her to fall to the ground, a trace of blood seeping out from the corner of her lips. Princess Changle sat on the ground. Raising her head, she coldly gazed at the king of Nanzhao. There was not the slightest trace of fear on her face. Instead, there was the arrogance of a noble princess and contempt for the king of Nanzhao. "You are not worthy of humiliating this princess." Finished speaking, Princess Changle unhesitatingly raised the dagger and stabbed towards her own chest. Whoosh! A streak of green light shot down from the ceiling, striking the dagger in Princess Changle's hand. The enormous force of the collision sent the dagger flying. At the same time, a dark green hairpin was nailed to a nearby pillar by Princess Changle's side. The Nanzhao king looked in shock at this sudden situation and raised his head to look at the roof beam. He looked up and saw Yi Li dressed in black, nonchalantly sitting on the ceiling beam, smiling and nodding at him. The king of Nanzhao recovered from his shock. Just as he was about to call for his imperial bodyguards, he saw a green shadow flash before him. Yi Li had already arrived in front of him. Without the slightest hesitation, she placed a dagger against his neck. Yi Li helplessly looked at Princess Changle and said, "Girl, you are truly ruthless in your actions. With that dagger you won't even need to take half a breath to see the king of hell." "Your Highness." Princess Changle stared at Yi Li in a daze. Clearly she did not understand why Yi Li would appear here. In a heavy voice, the king of Nanzhao asked, "Princess Ding, what is the meaning of this?" Helplessly, Yi Li replied, "In a moment of desperation, I had no other choice. King of Nanzhao, please forgive me." Yi Li was truly helpless. Since she could not kill the king of Nanzhao, she originally had no intention of appearing before him. As a result, just as she was considering how to make the king of Nanzhao unconscious and take Princess Changle away, before she could act, this scene occurred below. For the sake of Princess Changle's life, Yi Li could only deflect the dagger in Princess Changle's hand. At the same time, she exposed herself in front of others. Chapter 524. Outside the palace hall, the fighting was still in full swing. However, inside the palace hall, the atmosphere was cold and silent. Yi Li's expression was calm as she looked at the king of Nanzhao, who was a head taller than her. Her elegant face revealed an apologetic expression, as if she truly felt guilty for holding him hostage. However, the dagger placed against the king of Nanzhao's neck showed no signs of moving away. The king of Nanzhao only felt the skin on his neck being pierced by the ice-cold dagger, causing his hair to stand on end. "Princess Ding, what are you trying to do?" Yili glanced at Princess Changle, who was sitting on the ground. Pursing her lips, she smiled and said, "Why does the king of Nanzhao ask when you already know the answer? Isn't it obvious? You are doing this for this little beauty?" The king of Nanzhao was somewhat unconvinced. The little girl before him was the princess of the Dechu state. She had nothing to do with the Northwest. Naturally, the king of Nanzhao did not believe that Princess Ding had spent so much effort to barge in for a completely unrelated princess. Although she is the princess of the Dechu state, she has no value to Emperor Chu. Emperor Chu has already gifted her to I. After thinking it over, the king of Nanzhao could only believe that Princess Ding wanted to capture Princess Changle to threaten the emperor of the Dechu state, who let the entire world know that the enmity between Prince Ding and Emperor Chu was as deep as the ocean. There is no need for the king of Nanzhao to worry about this. The king of Nanzhao only needs to tell this consort whether or not this consort can take Princess Changle away. Yili did not refute his words, indifferently replying. The king of Nanzhao sneered and said, "A beauty gifted by another. If the original consort I wants it, there is nothing wrong with that. However, the princess of Nanzhao can come and go as she pleases. Do you think that there is no one in my Nanzhao?" I urge the princess of Nanzhao to immediately lay down her weapon. For the sake of Prince Ding, I will not make things difficult for the princess of Nanzhao. Otherwise, when the imperial bodyguards enter, it will not be so easy for the princess to escape. This king of Nanzhao is not as useless as he seems, Yili thought to herself. She smiled indifferently. "I'm afraid the guards won't have the chance to come in." Unknowingly, the sounds of fighting outside the door had gradually stopped. Originally, there was still a trace of pride on Nanzhao King's face, but he soon noticed that something was wrong. If the Nanzhao guards won, they would report it outside the hall no matter what. But at this moment, it was completely quiet outside the palace. Not even the slightest sound could be heard inside the palace. Nanzhao King's expression changed and he said, "My Nanzhao royal palace has 1,000 guards, and Nanzhao capital city has 8,000 elites garrisoned. Even if Shu Manlin was also Nanzhao King's daughter, even if Nanzhao King loved Shu Manlin more, he wouldn't hate Princess Anqi to this extent." Nanzhao King's face flashed with a trace of confusion. Clearly, he didn't understand Yili's question. How did he and his eldest daughter become like this today? He still remembered that Anqi was different from Xixiao, who liked to dance and sing since childhood. She had a straightforward personality and was very calm in her actions. When she was only 13 or 14 years old, she was able to help him deal with the state affairs. She had accepted many of the matters that he himself had been troubled by, and she would handle them properly. At that time he only thanked the heavens for giving him such a smart daughter. Even if he didn't have a prince, he had no regrets. So he made Anqi the crown princess and watched as Anqi worked hard to govern the country step by step and received the support of the people. But he didn't know when it started, but the joy and relief at the beginning gradually changed. Every time he saw the people show reverence and respect when they saw his daughter, he inexplicably felt displeased. He worked hard to govern the country for decades, but the people always said that this was not good. Even when they saw him, they feared and obeyed him, avoiding reverence and love. Why could his daughter so easily obtain something that he couldn't get in his life? Looking at Nanzhao King's changing expression, Yili felt that she already understood. Because of jealousy, not because he was worried about Princess Anqi usurping power, nor because he loved Shu Manlin more. It was just jealousy. A father was jealous of his daughter's ability to govern the country and the support of the people, so he did everything he could to make problems for his daughter. He even allowed others to kill her and added fuel to the fire. Yili shook her head and looked at Nanzhao King. If Princess Anqi is really defeated, how will Nanzhao succeed? Nanzhao King, have you really thought it through? The Nanzhao King's expression was ferocious, his breathing gradually becoming hurried. At this moment, Yili released the Nanzhao King and walked over to Princess Changle, who had already stood up. Softly laughing, she said, "Princess, let's go." Princess Changle glanced somewhat cautiously at the Nanzhao King, not knowing what he was thinking. His expression was ferocious and distorted, but it was as if he did not see them. Yili smiled and said, "There's no need to worry. Let's go." Pulling Princess Changle along, she walked out of the palace hall. Chapter 525. Outside the palace hall, the imperial bodyguards who had been guarding the sleeping quarters and those who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion had all been dealt with. However, there were still 7 or 8 survivors from the other group. Qin Feng and Zhuo Jing stood at the doorway waiting for Yili to emerge. Princess. As soon as the two emerged, the leader of the survivors immediately rushed forward. However, Zhuo Jing stepped forward and pulled him back. That person promptly replied, Princess. Princess, are you all right? This subordinate is incompetent. I was unable to rescue the princess earlier. Princess Changle hesitated. After looking at him for a long time, she asked, You are? Imperial bodyguard Yang? The man pulled down the veil covering his face, revealing a resolute and somewhat familiar face. Yili frowned. After thinking for a moment, she recalled that this was the commander of the imperial bodyguards in the Empress Palace. Yili said, Let's leave the palace first. Imperial bodyguard Yang clearly recognized Yili deferentially. He said, Many thanks to Princess for your assistance. The party exited the palace. As expected, they did not encounter any obstructions along the way. The plaza outside the palace gates was still lively and jubilant. However, if one looked carefully, they would discover that the people who should have been there were no longer there. Without any delay, Yili and her entourage returned to the relay station. Before they could ask any questions, Imperial bodyguard Yang knelt on the ground in front of Princess Changle, stating, This subordinate is incompetent and has given the princess a fright. This is the antidote. Princess, please take it quickly. From his sleeve, he withdrew a small green porcelain bottle and presented it to Princess Changle. Frowning, Yili asked, Princess, you have been poisoned? Along the way, Princess Changle's expression was normal. There were no abnormalities in her body. There were no signs of poisoning. Princess Changle hesitated for a moment before nodding her head. Imperial bodyguard Yang spoke with grief and indignation. If not for that vicious woman poisoning the princess, how could we have saved the princess so late? Only that vicious woman has this poison. As soon as we saved the princess, she would immediately destroy the antidote. As a result, we could only try to obtain the antidote before we could save the princess. This was why the princess was sent to the palace. Noble consort Lu? Yili asked, How did you get the antidote? Bodyguard Yang said, That vicious woman sent the princess into the palace and thought that the antidote was dispensable. But even so, 7 or 8 of our brothers still died to get the antidote. Fortunately, we made it in time. Otherwise, even if we were to die 10,000 times, we would not have the face to face the Empress and the old Duke. Yili raised her eyebrows and said, Did the Empress send you to save the princess? Imperial bodyguard Yang sternly replied, That's only natural. Every single one of your subordinates is Her Majesty the Empress's trusted aide and has received Her Majesty's grace. There were also a few brothers who had received Duke Hua's favor in the past. Originally, we wanted to make a move on the road, but we couldn't get the antidote. We also didn't dare to rashly take the princess's life. This subordinate thanks Wang Fei for her help. Hearing news of her imperial mother, Princess Changle's face was already covered in tears. Holding the medicine bottle, she promptly asked, How is my imperial mother? Imperial bodyguard Yang hesitated for a moment before replying, Her Majesty the Empress. When this subordinate left the capital, Her Majesty the Empress was still under house arrest in the palace. However, please be at ease, Princess. The old Duke has already made arrangements. Her Majesty the Empress has also said that even if she is not free, His Majesty will ensure her safety for the sake of face. I only ask that Princess not return to the Chu capital in the future. This is something that Her Majesty the Empress entrusted this subordinate to give to Princess. Imperial bodyguard Yang then handed over a small, exquisite and ordinary wooden box. Princess Changle stared blankly. Opening the box, she saw that it was only about 1 cun wide and 4 or 5 cun long. Opening the box, she saw several banknotes folded inside. On top of the banknotes, there was an exquisite, gorgeous hairpin and 7 or 8 luminous pearls. Although she did not see the denomination of the banknotes, she could tell from the luminous pearls that any one of them would be enough for Princess Changle to live the rest of her life without worry. Princess Ding. Imperial Mother doesn't want me anymore? Princess Changle asked in a low voice as she held the box. Yili sighed softly. Your imperial mother is doing this for your own good. Princess Changle had not been sent for a political marriage. Rather, she had been given to the king of Nanzhao by Mo Jingqi. This meant that in the future Princess Changle would never be able to appear before the Chu capital and the common people as a princess. Otherwise, when the time came, since Mo Jingqi was able to harden his heart and give his daughter to the king of Nanzhao, he would naturally be able to harden his heart and take her life. I know, Princess Changle said as she held the wooden box. However, she could not help but begin to sob. Henceforth she would no longer be the Princess Changle of the Dechu state. Presumably, her imperial father would soon have someone spread the news that Princess Changle had passed away from illness. Henceforth she would no longer be able to see her imperial mother and maternal grandfather. She could only wander the outside world without a name or surname. Seeing Princess Changle's sorrowful appearance, Yili reached out and stroked her hair, saying, "Good child, don't be sad. When the matters in the southern border are settled, why don't you come with us to the northwest?" Princess Changle hesitated for a moment before refusing Yili's proposal. "Many thanks, Princess Ding. However, my status is inconvenient. I fear that I will bring trouble to you and Uncle Prince Ding." Yili smiled and said, "You have even broken into the Nanzhao Palace. How can that be considered trouble? When I return, I will have someone take a look at this antidote. Princess, please rest well. As for the rest, wait for your Uncle Prince Ding to return. No one dares to casually break in here." Imperial bodyguard Yang was delighted to hear Yi Li's words. What the Empress and the old Duke were most worried about was Princess Changle living alone outside. Although they had made arrangements to secretly protect the princess in this chaotic world, who could confidently say that anywhere was safe except for the northwest? Originally, they had planned to secretly send the princess to the northwest to live in anonymity. With Princess Ding's invitation, it was naturally better for the princess. This subordinate thanks Princess Ding on behalf of the Empress and the old Duke. Waving her hand, Yili stated, "Our prince respects the Empress as his elder sister. Duke of Hua has watched the prince grow up. The eldest young miss of the Hua family is this consort's good friend. Princess Changle is naturally not an outsider." Imperial bodyguard Yang expressed his thanks once more. Gazing at Yili, Princess Changle stated, "I am no longer a princess. Imperial mother has given me the nickname Wuyo. Princess consort, please call me Wuyo." Wuyo was always happy. From this, it could be seen that the Empress loved her daughter dearly. Yili smiled and nodded. "Hey, Wuyo must be tired. Return to your room and rest." Princess Changle nodded her head and followed the imperial bodyguard to the room that was still empty. As soon as the door was closed, Wuyo collapsed onto the bed and began to sob while biting the quilt. While she was sobbing, she did not know that the people outside the room were all people with exquisite internal energy. Naturally, they could hear her clearly. Yili turned her head to look at Feng Jiao, who was standing under the shadow of the nearby eaves, and sighed silently. Chapter 526. Seeing Yili walk out, Feng Jiao didn't hide anymore and walked out from under the eaves. These years Yili more or less saw who Feng Jiao's heart was. Looking at Feng Jiao's usual carefree appearance, she could only sigh in her heart that the heavens were toying with people. In Yili's view, although Feng Jiao was a few years younger than Empress Hua, compared to the sunglasses, Feng Jiao was definitely more like a good husband. It was a pity that the two were not fated to be together. Feng Jiao heard about Empress Hua's encounter and naturally couldn't calm down. "Wang Fei, should we go to Wang Ye's side to take a look?" Feng Jiao walked forward and asked calmly. Yili thought for a bit and nodded. Although she wasn't worried that Mo Xiuyao would be injured, Xu Manlin had transferred hundreds of experts from the sacred ground of southern border. In addition, she had thousands of King City guards under her control. It was still worrying if the result wasn't seen. At this time, Mo Xiuyao and Su Qingchen were sitting leisurely in the tallest restaurant in Nanzhao City, leisurely tasting wine. This restaurant was 3 stories high. Sitting on the top floor, one could overlook almost any place in the imperial city except for the imperial palace. At this time, sitting on the 3rd floor was not only Mo Xiuyao and Su Qingchen, but also Mo Jingli and Lei Tingfeng, who had disappeared from the square in front of the imperial palace, as well as Prime Minister Lu and noble consort Lu. Everyone was leisurely tasting wine while paying attention to the fights in the city. The noise in the square was too shocking. The people who were immersed in singing, dancing, and drinking didn't notice that the imperial city was already in a bloody storm. The masters were fighting in full swing, but the guests were sitting on the side drinking and watching. It didn't sound very interesting, but it was the best way to solve the problem at this time. The people on each side had inextricable relationships with the protagonists in this fight. Naturally, they didn't want the other side to get involved. Therefore, they could only drink and watch the show together. At the same time, they could also restrain the other party. Emo Shuyao leaned lazily against the window and carelessly played with the wine cup in his hand. He did not even bother to look outside, as though it had nothing to do with him who the Nanzhao royal power would be. Lin Han walked over to Emo Xuyao's side and whispered a few words. Emo Xuyao, who had originally looked indifferent, immediately perked up. "Princess is fine?" Lin Han nodded and said, "Yes, Princess is much better. He said that Prince hasn't gone back yet, so he'll come over to take a look later." Emo Xuyao glanced downstairs and said regretfully, "I want to go back quickly, but it seems that I can't. Go and invite Princess Consort to come and sit." Everyone finally understood. Prince Ding had been listless all this time because Princess Ding was not present. With this thought, everyone present had different expressions. Some were angry, some were contemplative, and some were jealous. In less than a quarter of an hour, Yili appeared at the top of the stairs. Seeing that there were no other customers on the third floor, only the envoys from the various countries sitting at a table, she raised her eyebrows in surprise. As soon as Emo Shuyao saw Yili, he immediately got up and walked over. "Leader, how are you?" Yili nodded and said, "Everything is fine. Big brother is also here?" Su Qingchen nodded and pointed out the window. "Leader, come and take a look." In fact, no matter how high the restaurant was, it was still nighttime and they couldn't really see anything. Everyone was waiting here motionlessly because they were waiting for the final result and to prevent the other party from interfering. Yili casually glanced outside and lost interest. "Big brother, what's going on?" Su Qingchen smiled faintly. The Saintess of Nanjiang suddenly sent people to attack the tribal leaders who came to attend the wedding. Princess Anqi naturally wanted to ask her for an explanation, and then they started fighting. Of course, things were not as simple as Su Qingchen said. The tribal leaders that Shu Manlin sent people to attack were all supporters of Princess Anqi. Among them were Princess Anqi's in-laws and grandparents. When Princess Anqi received the news and went to help, she intercepted and killed the newlyweds midway. Princess Anqi had always won the hearts of the people. Naturally, she had a large number of loyal subordinates. Therefore, the two sides began to fight without giving way. "Princess Ding, who do you think will win between Princess Anqi and the Saintess of Nanjiang?" Emo Jingli suddenly asked. Everyone immediately looked at Yili. Yili calmly looked at Emo Jingli and saw that he was staring at her with a hint of provocation in his eyes. Yili only found it funny and said calmly, "Who wins and who loses is up to me? But there is a good saying, the world belongs to the one who wins the hearts of the people. Who is right and who is wrong is the matter of the Nanzhao royal family and the people. It has nothing to do with us outsiders." Princess Anqi had been ruling the country well and had greatly benefited the people. She was not someone who could be easily shaken by Shu Manlin's title as the so-called savior of Nanjiang. As long as Princess Anqi won tonight, her position in Nanzhao would not be easily shaken. Yili glanced at Emo Shuyao and Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and did not look worried at all. Yili could not help but calm down. The world belongs to the one who wins the hearts of the people. Everyone was thinking about this in their hearts. Li Er's words are incisive. Su Qingchen praised with a smile. Yili was a little embarrassed. What she said was just a common saying from her previous life. Emo Shuyao smiled proudly and said, "Li's words are naturally reasonable." Su Qingchen disdained to argue with this proud and childish man, not to mention that he was speaking well of Li. She pretended not to see his proud face. Everyone present was not an ignorant youth who did not know the world. They all had different opinions about Yili's words. But there was one person who was dissatisfied and said coldly, "According to Miss Ye's words, the world belongs to the one who wins the hearts of the people. Doesn't that mean that the Dechu state's royal family should have already given up the throne to the Ding manor?" Compared to the hearts of the people, although the Dechu state's royal family was the rightful ruler of the Dechu state, they could not compare to the Ding manor. Everyone looked strangely at noble consort Lu. Their eyes were full of mockery and disdain. It was clearly an incisive statement, but this woman could twist it like this. Should they say that noble consort Lu and Emo Jingqi were husband and wife? Actually, noble consort Lu knew something was wrong as soon as she said it. She didn't want to say anything. She just saw that Yi Li's casual words were highly praised by young Master Qingchen. She also saw the surprised and envious eyes of everyone present. She also saw Emo Xiuyao holding Yi Li's arm with a proud expression. It was as if he was happier than her being praised. She couldn't help but feel a throbbing pain in her heart. She spat out harsh words without thinking. Yi Li looked at noble consort Lu calmly and said, "Noble consort Lu's words, does it mean that you admit that the current royal family is not what the people want? Since noble consort Lu knows, you should scrupulously abide by the inner curtain and advise the emperor to diligently cultivate his virtue. You shouldn't speculate and talk nonsense here. My northwestly city has nothing to do with your Dechu state. Even if noble consort Lu feels that Emperor Chu is incompetent and unworthy of the throne and wants to abdicate the throne, it has nothing to do with our prince." Chapter 527. After speaking, her gaze calmly swept across Emo Jingli's face. As expected, she saw Emo Jingli's expression change slightly. Emo Jingli showed a rare smile on his cold face, which made people feel uncomfortable. "So noble concubine Lu thinks that my brother doesn't deserve to be the emperor? I didn't know until now that you are such a noble concubine. It's really an eye-opener." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Noble concubine Lu glared at Emo Jingli. Emo Jingli even respected Emo Jingqi because of his mood these years. How could he be afraid of noble concubine Lu? She sneered. "Wasn't it noble concubine Lu who said that?" "Your Highness." Prime Minister Lu looked at his daughter with displeasure. Although he could keep some thoughts to himself, what noble concubine Lu said was too much. It was not the time for them to offend Prince Ding. Obviously, the bottom line of not offending Prince Ding was Princess Ding. Offending Princess Ding was more important than offending Prince Ding. However, his daughter couldn't see the situation clearly. She talked nonsense and challenged Princess Ding's bottom line. "Your Highness just made a slip of the tongue. Princely, please be careful." Emo Jingli snorted disdainfully. A slip of the tongue? It was not the first time for him to know noble concubine Lu. She was always arrogant, as if everyone in the world only deserved to be the dust under her feet. Emo Jingli didn't doubt that she looked down on her brother and thought that he didn't deserve to be the emperor. While Emo Jingli and noble concubine Lu were quarreling, Emo Xiuyao was pouring tea for Yi Li attentively and saying sweet words to Yi Li without any scruples. It almost blinded the eyes of all the unloved people on the scene. Lei Tingfeng looked at the two of them thoughtfully and said with a smile, "Prince Ding and Princess Ding's relationship is really good. It really makes me envious." Even if they had a good relationship, there was no need to show it in public, right? Emo Xiuyao nodded in agreement. As the saying goes, one should marry a virtuous wife. As a man, having a good wife is of utmost importance. For those who were lucky, for example, I married Mr. Li. Those who are unlucky. Emo Xiuyao didn't finish his sentence, but everyone understood what he meant. However, they all had their own choices for the unlucky person. Everyone looked at Yi Li at the same time. They couldn't help but admit that Emo Xiuyao was indeed lucky. Princess Ding. Princess Ding was not only beautiful and had a natural temperament, but she was also good at governing the country. Nowadays, the most feared Qi Lin in the northwest was trained by Princess Ding. The fourth and fifth sons of the Su family led the people in the north to cultivate wastelands and plant farmland. It was said that it was Princess Ding's idea to bring the originally barren north to a peaceful and happy life. Even without these, just the fact that Ding Wangfei had Su Hongyu and Su Hongyan's two uncles as well as that fifth brother's cousin, if people knew that the Su family valued Yi Li this much, it was likely that all the men in the world would fight to marry this beauty. Ever since Emo Xiuyao and Yi Li got married, Emo Xiuyao, who was originally living in seclusion in the Prince Ding mansion with a crippled leg and a disfigured face, had managed to rule the northwest in just a few years. He was healthy and even had a son. What kind of luck was this? In this process, Emo Xiuyao had only paid the price of a head of white hair. More importantly, ever since his hair turned white, Emo Xiuyao seemed to have become even more dazzling. Even Yi Li blushed at Emo Xiuyao's shameless words. Her face was as calm as water, but she secretly pinched his waist mercilessly. Emo Xiuyao's face immediately fell. Wife, seeing that the two were getting more and more out of hand, Su Qingchen coughed lightly to remind them that there were still outsiders around. Yili was too lazy to pay attention to Emo Shuyao's antics. She looked at the place where the fighting was still going on and asked, Shu Manlin has mobilized the Nanzhao city guards? Su Qingchen nodded slightly and smiled. Lear, don't worry. Princess Anqi is not a weak woman who can be bullied. The tribes that came to the wedding this time, including the Puga family and Princess Anqi's grandfather's family, all brought many people. Sitting by the window, Emo Jingli stared at a certain place for a long time. Suddenly he turned around and shouted at Emo Shuyao, There. Emo Shuyao, you didn't keep your word. Emo Shuyao lazily leaned his head on Yi Li's shoulder and glanced at Emo Jingli with a puzzled expression. What do you mean? Emo Jingli sneered. You dare say that those people are not from the northwest? Not Qilin. Hearing his words, the others immediately stood up and walked to the window to take a closer look. Sure enough, they saw a group of people cutting through the chaos like a hot knife through butter. Wherever they went, they were invincible. Even in the dark, they could clearly see the astonishing speed at which they were advancing. Even if the enemy was several times stronger than them, they could not stop them at all. Everyone looked at Emo Shuyao. Apart from the Northwest and Qilin, no one else had that kind of fighting power. Oh, we've been discovered. Li, what should we do? Emo Shuyao did not shirk away. He blinked innocently and looked at Yi Li. Yi Li could not help but smile. It was now dark. Even if Shu Manlin had thousands of people in her hands, if Qilin did not want to be discovered, he would not have revealed himself. This was clearly Emo Shuyao's intention. Was he supporting Princess Anqi? Emo Jingli said angrily, Emo Shuyao, we agreed that no one could interfere in Nanjiang's affairs. You're clearly breaking the agreement. Emo Shuyao scornfully curled his lips. I did break the agreement. What do you want? Bite me? Clearly reading the meaning of Emo Shuyao's expression, Emo Jingli's facial muscles could not help but twitch. Lei Tingfeng still had some sense. He did not intend to interfere in Nanjiang's affairs. Nanzhao and Xiling shared a large area of land. For many years there had been friction and they could not be friends. Genom of Gojoseon already had some plans. If he could not break into the Dechu state in the short term, then he would start with Nanzhao. Therefore it did not matter to him who had Nanzhao in their hands. Prince Ding, since we have an agreement, you should give us a reasonable explanation for acting rashly? Lei Tingfeng said politely. Mo Shuyao smiled. Explanation? It's nothing. Of course, it's because I promised you before I promised Princess Anqi. Moreover, I did not intend to interfere in Nanjiang's affairs. It's just that Princess Anqi suspected that someone would take advantage of the wedding to cause trouble. She asked I for a few guards to protect the newlyweds and the wedding guests. Princess Anqi and young Master Qingchen are best friends. She is also quite close to Ai's beloved concubine. How can I not agree to such a small matter? Also, I did not give it to you for free. Princess Anqi asked I to lend each guard 5,000 taels of silver. If they were injured or killed in battle, they would have to pay another 500 taels of silver for medical expenses or 10,000 taels of silver as compensation. This is a fair and cost-effective deal. I can do it even if we are not friends. Hearing this, everyone silently vomited blood in their hearts. Yi Li was thoughtful. She did not expect Emo Shuyao to have understood the essence of mercenary army. Speaking of which, if Qilin became a mercenary army, not only could they make a lot of money but more importantly they could have a lot of opportunities for actual combat. After all, the Northwest had been too peaceful in recent years. No amount of training could compare to the effect of actual combat. Of course, this was just Yi Li's imagination. She could not turn the well-trained Qilin into a mercenary army. What is Li thinking? Emo Shuyao asked in a low voice when he saw Yi Li lowering her head and thinking. He knew that she must have some plans in mind. Yi Li shook her head and said, let's talk about it later. Emo Shuyao also knew that this was not the place to talk. He glanced at the people who were intentionally or unintentionally glancing in their direction. He stood up openly and hugged Yi Li to stand by the window to watch the battle. Yi Li had undergone special training and Emo Shuyao had profound skills. The two of them naturally had better night vision than the people present. Looking at the performance of the Qilin in the distance, Yi Li nodded with satisfaction. The 5 years of training were not in vain. The Qilin members were basically mature and experienced. They could completely carry out different kinds of missions on their own. Emo Shuyao pointed in the distance and said, Shu Manlin's people have begun to attack the princess residence. Yili frowned and said, at this time, Princess Anshi should not be in the princess residence, right? Mo Shuyao smiled and said, of course not. Is she waiting to die in the princess residence at this time? Princess Anshi probably did not expect that her father would give the token to Shu Manlin to mobilize the guards in the city. Facing 7,000 to 8,000 soldiers and hundreds of masters, even with Mo Xuyao's support, Qilin could only avoid the attack. It was impossible for them to fight head-on. After all, Mo Xuyao did not bring many people to Nanjiang. It was impossible for him to mobilize all the forces of the Prince Ding mansion in Nanjiang for Princess Anshi. Li, do you want to guess where Princess Anshi is now? Mo Xuyao asked cheerfully. Everyone except Su Qingchen pricked up their ears to listen to the conversation. Yi Li frowned and stared at the scene outside for a long time before slowly saying, to catch the bandits, first catch the leader. Princess Anshi was not in the princess residence at this time. Naturally, she could not fight in the city. Then they could only go find Shu Manlin. Only by getting the token in Shu Manlin's hand could they stop the killing in the city. The guards in Nanzhao City only listened to the chief and did not recognize the person. Without the token, even the king of Nanzhao might not be able to do anything. Where is Shu Manlin? Mo Shuyao looked at Yili with a smile and said, of course she is in the Nanzhao palace. That woman wants to be the king of Nanzhao so badly. If she is not in the palace, where else can she be? Yili frowned slightly. The king of Nanzhao was still in the palace. Although there were people left behind to deal with the aftermath, if they were not careful, they might not be able to find the king of Nanzhao so quickly. However, if Shu Manlin found the king of Nanzhao first, it would not be good for Princess Anshi. Mo Shuyao smiled and said, Li, don't worry. It would be good if the king of Nanzhao knows his place. If he still wants to rely on Shu Manlin, I'm afraid he will be in big trouble. Don't forget to stay by Shu Manlin's side. Yili understood. Shu Manlin still had Tan Jiji by her side. He was not someone easy to deal with. If Shu Manlin won, Tan Jiji would never let the king of Nanzhao live. If the king of Nanzhao died, Shu Manlin's position would be unstable. Chapter 528. Yili had fallen asleep in Mo Xuyao's arms when Princess Anshi sent someone to invite the distinguished guests into the palace. Although it was a bit depressing that they had to enter the palace to discuss matters instead of going back to rest, no one present would say no. Everyone knew that Princess Anshi was the final winner of this battle. Naturally, everyone present wanted to enter the palace as soon as possible to win more benefits for themselves. Mo Xuyao wanted to let Yili go back to rest, but Yili remembered that the king of Nanzhao was still hidden somewhere in the palace, so she decided to enter the palace again. It was still the same hall where the king of Nanzhao had received them, but the people in the hall had changed. Princess Anshi was still wearing her wedding gown with white flowers and blue flowers. However, the gown was stained with dark red blood, which made her look even colder and more murderous under the light. At this time, Princess Anshi was standing in the hall, looking down at Shu Manlin, who was sitting in the middle of the hall in a sorry state. It's so late. It's really rude of me to invite you into the palace. Princess Anshi nodded to Yili and then apologized to the people who entered the hall. Lei Tingfeng said with a smile, don't be so polite, princess. It happened so suddenly tonight. I'm relieved to see that you and your wife are safe. Pua stood behind Princess Anshi. There were still some bloodstains on his young face. Obviously, both he and Princess Anshi had gone through a tough battle tonight. Princess Anshi said with a smile, thank you for your concern, Crown Prince of Genom King Gojoseon. Prime Minister Lu frowned. Why didn't the king of Nanzhao come out when such a big thing happened? Princess Anshi also frowned, saying, to be honest, I didn't see my father after returning to the palace. He's sending people to look for him. Shu Manlin, the tokens of the guards of Yunwu City and the guards of the palace are in your hands. Where is my father? Shu Manlin's face darkened. She said coldly, how do I know where he is? Princess Anshi sneered, the tokens are in your hands. How do you not know where my father is? Then how did you get the token? Shu Manlin was stunned, but soon understood what Princess Anshi meant. She wanted to put the blame on her for the disappearance of the king of Nanzhao. Regarding this matter, Shu Manlin was really wronged. She had never thought that she couldn't defeat Princess Anshi with all the masters of the sacred land of Nanjiang and the guards of Yunwu City. Originally she had hoped to kill Princess Anchi directly. As long as Princess Anchi was dead, her subordinates would be defenseless. Who would have thought that she would be surrounded by a group of extremely powerful guards? Not to mention killing her, she was caught red-handed by Princess Anchi when she broke into the Saint Lady's Hall. What do you mean? The command medallion was naturally given to me by the king. Shu Manlin said sternly. Princess Anchi wasn't in a hurry. She smiled faintly and said, Father will give you both the Imperial Guard token and the Guard token of the royal city. Are you joking? Shu Manlin was a little uneasy. Normally the king of Nanzhao wouldn't give her such an important thing. But this time she used some special methods to bewitch the king of Nanzhao into giving her the tokens. But no matter how she said it was the king of Nanzhao who gave her the tokens, no one would believe her. Everyone present was a tyrant with great power in their hands. Naturally, they understood the importance of power and military power. As the king of Nanzhao, how could he give such an important thing to a holy maiden so easily? Even if someone believed it, now that she had lost, if the king of Nanzhao didn't appear in time to save her, the truth would become a lie. But where was the king of Nanzhao now? Of course, Shu Manlin didn't know that when she led most of the guards to besiege Princess Anchi, someone had sneaked into the palace to save the princess. Before leaving, the person had knocked out the king of Nanzhao and hid him. If she knew, she wouldn't have taken so many people with her. So no one in the palace knew the whereabouts of the king of Nanzhao. Princess Anchi looked down at Shu Manlin, who was in a sorry state but still refused to admit defeat. A trace of disgust flashed through her eyes. She was really tired of this woman. Over the years she had come to understand Shu Manlin's true identity. So in the beginning, when Shu Manlin targeted her from time to time, she tolerated her. However, she didn't expect that Shu Manlin would become more and more excessive. What saddened her the most was that her father actually gave Shu Manlin the token of the guards of King City. Could it be that her father didn't think that Shu Manlin could kill her if he had the authority to mobilize the guards of King City? Or did her father think so himself? Shu Manlin, you mobilized the palace and palace guards without permission, attacked the princess's residence and tried to kill the crown princess of Nanzhao. Also, you can't absolve yourself from the blame for my father's disappearance. Do you know your crime? Princess Anchi took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice. Shu Manlin was speechless. She sneered, now that you've won you should be happy. Say whatever you want. Anchi, don't pretend. You're the one who held the king hostage and framed me. Princess Anchi didn't get angry. She smiled indifferently and said, Don't you know I's whereabouts very well tonight? I didn't even have the chance to get close to the palace when you were surrounded by so many soldiers. Also, weren't you the one who took away nearly half of the palace guards? The palace guards bear the important responsibility of protecting the palace and the king of Nanzhao. Chapter 529. Yili and Emo Shuyao walked out hand in hand. Su Qingchen was the last to leave. She stopped after a few steps and turned back to look at Princess Anchi. Princess Anchi asked, Qingchen, do you have anything else to say? Su Qingchen glanced indifferently at Puo, who was standing behind Princess Anchi. Princess Anchi pursed her lips and smiled. Puo is one of us. Qingchen, if you have anything to say, just say it. After this night, Princess Anchi and her new husband obviously trusted each other more and were closer to each other. Su Qingchen didn't stand on ceremony and asked, Princess, what are your plans after finding the king of Nanzhao? Plans? Princess Anchi didn't understand. Su Qingchen said carefully, after what happened tonight, the king of Nanzhao will hold a grudge against you no matter what. Princess, have you not considered the future? Will the king of Nanzhao intervene to save Shu Manlin after he comes out? Or even support a second or third Shu Manlin? Princess Anchi's expression was a little gloomy. She lowered her eyes and said, He is my father. Su Qingchen said calmly, I didn't ask you to do anything to the king of Nanzhao. Princess Anchi was a little ashamed. She looked at Su Qingchen and smiled bitterly. She admitted generously, it was I who wanted to do something to my father. I've had enough of these years. Can you help me? Looking at the exhausted Princess Anchi who sat weakly on the steps, Su Qingchen sighed softly. He said indifferently, the king of Nanzhao was frightened and seriously ill. He can't take charge of the court. Since Princess Anchi is married, you can ascend to the throne, right? Princess Anchi was startled. Although she had thought of weakening her father's power, She had never thought of becoming the king of Nanzhao before her father passed away. Su Qingchen looked at her calmly and said, "You and I have known each other for so many years. We have often discussed how to rule a country." Princess Anqi nodded and said, "Yes, I have learned a lot from knowing Qingchen." Su Qingchen said, "I have taught you how to rule a country, but I have never taught you how to rule a country. Anqi, this is the last time I will teach you. Do you know why you have always been suppressed by Shu Manlin all these years? Because you lack ruthlessness. Being an emperor was a lonely path. Tactics, strategy, and decisiveness were all indispensable. What you lack the most is ruthlessness. Since ancient times, emperors have been heartless and the royal family has no flesh and blood. Every time you show mercy, the enemy will only rise again in return. You are cruel enough to yourself so you can endure any kind of hardship, but you are too kind to the people around you. Anqi, when you can truly handle the relationship with the people around you, you will become a qualified king." After saying that, Su Qingchen didn't stay any longer and walked out of the door. Princess Anqi suddenly asked, "What about Prince Ding?" Everyone in the world knows that Prince Ding dotes on Princess Consort very much. He also trusts Lady Su a lot. Does Qingchen think that Prince Ding is a qualified king? Su Qingchen turned to look at him and smiled faintly. There is no one more suitable than Prince Ding in the world. There was another condition for becoming a king, and that was to learn how to make choices. Prince Ding knows what he wants and what he should do, so I have never been worried about him. King of Nanzhao, take care. Seeing Su Qingchen turn and leave without any reluctance, Princess Anqi faced the empty hall and felt a chill in her heart. She couldn't help but hold her knees and lower her head as tears fell silently. The sparkling tears fell on her knees and soon soaked her white clothes. Pua walked to Princess Anqi's side and squatted down. Looking at the woman holding her knees and crying silently on the ground, a trace of heartache flashed in his eyes. He clumsily raised his hand and patted Princess Anqi's shoulder, saying softly, I'll stay with you." Princess Anqi raised her head and stared blankly at his stiff face. Finally, she couldn't help but lean into his arms. Her sobs echoed in the hall. When Su Qingchen walked out of the palace, the sky was already slightly bright. There were still 2 or 3 drunk people wandering in the square in front of the palace. They hadn't gone home yet. A gust of wind blew. Su Qingchen looked at the setting moon and let out a long sigh. "What's wrong with Master Qingchen? You look so sad." A faint smile came from behind him. Qingchen frowned unhappily. What did it mean to look sad? When he came back to his senses, he saw Yili and Emo Xiao standing behind him and looking at him. The difference was that Yili looked worried, while Emo Xiao looked teasing and gloating. Su Qingchen said lightly, "I thought you had already returned to the post house to rest. Aren't you tired after a day and night?" Yili said softly, "We were a little worried when we saw Big Brother lagging behind. Although it's okay now, it was a mess last night. It's better to go back together." Seeing Yili's worried eyes, Su Qingchen's heart warmed. What he had just said to Princess Anqi was not just to guide her on how to be a queen or how to deal with the future. It was also to tell her that from now on, their former friendship had become a thing of the past. Even though they both ruled Nanzhao, the status of the king of Nanzhao and the crown princess was completely different. After Princess Anqi ascended the throne, the whole of Nanzhao became a responsibility that she could never get rid of. It was impossible for there to be such a simple friendship between them. Su Qingchen did not have many friends, but he was more like a teacher and a friend to Princess Anqi. Princess Anqi will be the ruler of a country after she ascends the throne. With Master Qingchen's status, it's naturally inconvenient for him to be too close to her. Moreover, Princess Anqi is now a married woman. Master Qingchen has to avoid arousing suspicion. No one would be in a good mood without a close friend. Your brother has always been open-minded. He'll be fine after a few days. Yili nodded and sighed. I hope so. My brother became famous at a young age. There aren't many people who can get along with him. Emo Xiuyao glanced at Su Qingchen, who was walking alone in front of them. A sly smile flashed in his eyes. He looked at Yili and said, Yili, speaking of which, we said that we could have fun on our way back. Now we have to stay for Princess Anqi's coronation and go back to take part in your military exercise. It seems that we don't have enough time. Yili blinked. What's Prince's plan? Yili had been familiar with Emo Xiuyao's temperament over the past few years. His words clearly indicated that he already had a plan. Emo Xiuyao smiled with satisfaction. He lowered his head and kissed Yili's lips. You know me best, Yili. We've already attended Princess Anshi's wedding. Why don't we? Yili understood that Emo Xiuyao had no intention of attending the coronation. What do you want? Emo Xiuyao said, your brother's presence is enough for the coronation. Who dares to say that young Master Qingshen's name isn't important enough? Let's travel slowly back to the northwest. What do you think, Yili? Young Master Qingshen was famous all over the world. More importantly, he represented the Su family. Behind the Su family was Princess Ding. Princess Ding was Prince Ding. Su Qingshen's participation in the coronation was enough to show the Northwest's attitude. Yili hesitated. She had to admit that she was a little tempted. She had been busy in the Northwest for the past few years. She had never really had the time to leisurely travel. Will Big Brother agree? Of course. Your brother will definitely be worried. He'll definitely wait until Princess Anshi's coronation before leaving. It's a waste of time for us to stay here. Then, in the end, she couldn't resist the temptation of traveling. Yili could only feel sorry for her brother. Chapter 530. Emo Xiuyao finally persuaded Su Qingshen to stay in Nanzhao to deal with the follow-up matters. Satisfied, he left Nanzhao with Yili and began to travel freely. Unlike Yili, Emo Xiuyao did not feel guilty or worried about leaving Su Qingshen in Nanzhao. In fact, Emo Xiuyao still thought that young Master Qingshen kept a low profile. In other words, he did not work hard. Young Master Qingshen became famous at a young age. He was once a talent valued by many great scholars. Unfortunately, since he resigned and traveled around, young Master Qingshen's name was more common in rural legends and Jianghu rumors. In the eyes of the world, young Master Qingshen's immortal charm was better than his strategic means. But Emo Xiuyao knew that Su Qingshen's ability was not limited to this. At least half of Princess Anshi's achievements today were due to Su Qingshen. In the past few years, the southwest of Dechu State could be said to be sandwiched between West Hill and Nanzhao. Today's situation could not be achieved without Su Qingshen's cooperation. Perhaps they had learned the lesson of their predecessors who were in the limelight. The two generations of the Su family liked to keep a low profile and bide their time. In the development of the Northwest these few years, the Su family definitely deserved the most credit. But when people talked about it, they would only praise Prince Ding and his princess consort for being wise and rarely mentioned the Su family. It could be seen that the Su family had been rather successful. This also made Emo Xiuyao very helpless. To keep a low profile, it would inevitably limit the performance of their talents. If these people worked hard obediently, how much time could he save to play with Ali? In the post house, Su Qingshen sat alone behind the desk with his eyes closed. The words Emo Xiuyao said before leaving still rang in his ears. Brother Qingshen, I dare not guarantee the prosperity of the Su family, but as long as I am alive and Emo Yuchen is alive, I will guarantee the peace of the Su family. Emo Xiuyao rarely called Emo Xiaobao by his full name. Usually he would just call him Emo Xiaobao. Some people who didn't know the inside story even thought that the little heir of the Prince Ding mansion was called Emo Xiaobao. Therefore, the sincerity and determination in Emo Xiuyao's words could be seen. It wasn't that the Su family didn't trust Emo Xiuyao, but rather they didn't trust Wang Quan. For this reason, the Su family had paid a heavy price. Although it wasn't to the point where the entire Su family was exterminated and their blood flowed like a river, several generations of the Su family had been suppressed. Many of the family's descendants had failed to achieve their goals and died of depression. Even though his grandfather was a world-renowned scholar, when had he ever truly lived a carefree life? Sometimes such a blunt knife was even more torturous than a direct cut. Young Master Qingshen. Hearing this, Prime Minister Lu complained in his heart. When the emperor attacked the Su family, he had completely offended the Su family. Now Prince Ding had given this matter to Su Qingshen. Even if Su Qingshen wasn't Princess Anshi's friend, he wouldn't stand on their side. Su Qingshen said with a faint smile, since the king of Nanzhao can't deal with the state affairs, it's natural for Princess Anshi to ascend the throne as the crown princess. Even if the prince is here, what objection can he have? Prime Minister Lu, you and I just need to wait for Princess Anshi to ascend the throne on an auspicious day. Prime Minister Lu's face turned green and white. He just didn't want Princess Anshi to ascend the throne. Su Qingshen didn't look at Prime Minister Lu's face. He lowered his eyes and sipped the tea in his cup, hiding the disdain in his eyes. As a prime minister, he thought too highly of himself if he wanted to influence the succession of the throne of Nanzhao. I still have some things to deal with, so I won't keep you company. This meant that he was going to serve tea and see the guest out. Prime Minister Lu's expression changed. Finally, he snorted and left. As soon as Prime Minister Lu left, someone came to report that the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon wanted to see him. Su Qingchen frowned and said, "Close the door. I won't see any guests today." The guard left to pass the order. Qin Feng sat aside and asked curiously, "Eldest young master, is it really okay to close the door and not see any guests?" Su Qingchen said with a smile, "What's the problem? It's just a matter of talking about those things. When Princess Anxi ascends the throne, they will have nothing to say." Even if people didn't want Princess Anxi, who had a good relationship with the Northwest, to ascend the throne, these people were all envoys, and there were no more than 100 people at most. Could it be that they had the ability to stop it? Su Qingchen picked up the pen and wrote a few lines. Then he calmly folded the paper and put it in an envelope, handing it to Qin Feng and saying, "Please send it to Princess Anxi." Qin Feng didn't ask more. He took the letter and turned to go out at once. An hour later, Su Qingchen's letter was unfolded on Princess Anxi's table. The elegant handwriting was full of hidden sharpness and murderous intent. "If you don't make up your mind, you'll be in trouble instead. In the way of the king, those who follow will prosper and those who oppose will die." Chapter 531. After looking at the letter for a long time, Princess Anxi asked, "Where is Shu Manlin?" The guard beside her replied, "Princess, she is locked up in the dungeon." Princess Anxi was silent for a moment and said, "Send her on her way. Send the tribal leaders who helped Shu Manlin on her way as well." "Yes, Princess." No matter how bloody the Nanzhao kingdom was, Yi Li and Emo Xiuyao were enjoying a rare moment of relaxation. They did not bring any guards with them. They left Qin Feng, Zhuojing and Feng San in Nanzhao to assist Su Qingchen. They only rode a wild horse that Emo Xiuyao had just tamed. With some luggage, they left the Nanzhao kingdom and headed towards the northwest. In order not to be disturbed along the way, Emo Xiuyao specially dyed his white hair, which he had been used to for several years, to black hair. After changing into ordinary clothes, the two of them really looked like a pair of immortal couples walking in the pugilistic world. Just when everyone thought that Prince Ding and Princess Ding would definitely rush back to the northwest, Emo Xiuyao leisurely took Yi Li through the northwest border of Nanzhao and entered the West Hill. Hundreds of years ago, the West Hill and the Dechu state were one. So even after hundreds of years, the language and customs of the people of the two countries did not change much. Emo Xiuyao and Yi Li just disguised themselves and sneaked into the West Hill border. They did not arouse any suspicion along the way. The two of them were important figures that involved the entire Northwest. Usually, no matter where they went, they were surrounded by attendants. When had they ever been at ease? This time the two of them did not bring any guards. They traveled in light carriages and toured the mountains and rivers. Even if they did not deliberately visit any famous mountains, rivers or holy places, they still felt very free and happy. Emo Xiuyao looked at Yi Li's relaxed eyebrows and the faint but relaxed smile on her face. He felt very guilty. Over the years, Li's pressure was no less than that of anyone in the Northwest, perhaps even more. All of this was because of him. If she hadn't married him, it would have been easy for Li to live any kind of life she wanted. But because he was trapped in the Northwest, dealing with endless political affairs and facing enemies that seemed to be as many as the world, this was definitely not the life he wanted for Li. He wanted Li to become the most honorable and happiest woman in the world. He wanted her to be able to do whatever she wanted and go wherever she wanted. Sitting in a corner of the inn, Yi Li looked up at Emo Xiuyao, who was lost in thought, and asked softly, "What are you thinking about?" Emo Xiuyao blinked. He looked at Yi Li and whispered, "Li, do you like your current life?" Yi Li raised her eyebrows and nodded, "It's not bad." Seeing Emo Xiuyao's apologetic expression, Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "It's good to have time to go sightseeing. But if you want me to travel the world all day like Big Brother, I can't stand it." Yi Li was not lying. She was not a romantic scholar like Su Qingchen, who was deeply attached to mountains and rivers. Sightseeing was a way for her to relax, not to live a normal life. It was easier for her to live a normal life. In essence, Yi Li felt that she was a very tacky person. Even if she wanted to travel the world, Yili felt that it should be done when she was at least 40 or 50 years old. Basically, being a special forces soldier was a career that required hard work. So when she was young, she should do the things that young people did. Otherwise, what would she do when she was old? Just stare at each other in a daze? I thought that Lily liked to live a leisurely life. The busy life these past few years isn't what Lily wants, right? Emo Shuyao asked. Yili was silent for a moment and said, "We've discussed this before. I thought you already understood what I meant. I don't like to fight for power. It's best to live a peaceful life. But in this world, unless I live in seclusion, it won't be easy to live a happy life, right? Moreover, I'm not alone. Even if it wasn't for you, I would still have a husband and children. If my husband wasn't Prince Ding and my son wasn't Prince Ding's heir, then would he still be as safe and carefree as he is now? He might get bullied by others because of his status, and I can't protect him all the time. In addition, compared to retreating to the backyard without freedom, I prefer to walk freely in the open. If you want something, you naturally have to give something. Compared to the freedom I have now, being a bit busy isn't unacceptable, right?" Emo Shuyao looked seriously at Yili and said, "No matter what Lily thinks, I hope that Li doesn't have to worry about anything. As long as it's something that Li wants, there will be someone who will bring the best in the world to Li. But I can't do it." Yili helplessly lifted Emo Shuyao's face. She saw the sincerity, guilt, helplessness, and grievance in those handsome eyes. She couldn't help but smile and say, "You mean that you want to create a cage made of gold and precious stones to lock me in? Then I'll eat dragon liver and phoenix marrow, wear gold and silver thread, and even use immortal dew to rinse my mouth? Shuyao, this isn't what I want. What I want is that no matter where you want to go, no matter how high you want to go, you and I will be able to walk side by side. Do you understand? Anything else?" Emo Shuyao looked at her as if he was waiting for her to ask for more. Li's request was too difficult for many people, but for Emo Shuyao it was too simple. He wanted to give Li the best, everything that she wanted. Even if he didn't have it now, he would get it in the future and he would steal it for her. Yili tilted her head to look at him. After a while she smiled and said, "Also, if there is a second woman on this road, don't blame me for kicking you down. There will never be a second Li in this world." Emo Shuyao said with a soft sigh. There was only one Li, so there would never be a second woman on their road. After comforting a certain someone who was throwing a tantrum, Yili added some of Emo Shuyao's favorite vegetables and put them in his bowl, indicating that he should eat. The main hall of the inn was not a good place to talk. Fortunately, the inn was open for business and there were not many people in the main hall. The two of them sat in the corner and no one noticed their interaction. While eating, the two of them discussed the journey ahead. A large group of people walked in from the entrance of the inn, each of them carrying a weapon. Just by looking at their clothes, one could tell that they were not ordinary people. The innkeeper quickly went up to greet them and the main hall became lively. Yili frowned and said in a low voice, "Why are there so many Jianghu people in this place?" This was only a small unknown city in Xiling, and it was rare to see Jianghu people here. Not to mention coming in such a large group like this. Emo Shuyao muttered to himself and looked at those people for a while before saying, "Speaking of which, this year seems to be the martial arts convention that is held every 9 years. Martial arts convention? To choose the chief of the martial arts world?" Speaking of the martial arts convention, Yili's first impression was to become the chief of the martial arts world. Emo Shuyao laughed in a low voice and said, "Yili has never liked to pay attention to Jianghu matters. Where did you hear it from? What chief of the martial arts world? The Jianghu is all about the sects and clans. Who would listen to who? Even if he was the world's #1 martial artist, not everyone would listen to him. If the world's #1 martial artist was a loner, then he would not be able to command some small sects and clans, let alone leading a group of heroes. The chief of the martial arts world was just something imagined in those storybooks. I remember now, Prince seemed to have participated in the martial arts convention 18 years ago. So this so-called convention is a convention for Jianghu people to compete for rankings? Yili quickly remembered. Emo Shuyao had obtained the title of one of the world's 4 masters at the martial arts convention 18 years ago. At that time, Emo Shuyao was only 14 years old. Emo Shuyao was only in his teens, but he had already experienced the 3rd martial arts convention. Of course, Emo Shuyao did not participate in the 2nd convention for some reason. Is this convention held in Xiling? Is Shuyao going? Yili smiled and asked, You didn't participate last time. This time you might be able to obtain the title of the world's #1 master and go back. Emo Shuyao shook his head and smiled. If Yili is interested, then let's go take a look. But forget about the #1 master. The #1 master meant that there would be countless people coming to challenge you and defeat you. Emo Shuyao did not think that he had the time to deal with the endless stream of Jianghu masters. If he had the time, he might as well accompany Yili to bully Emo Xiaobao. Yili smiled and said, speaking of which, Prince and Tower Master Ling seem to have an unfinished battle. Do you think we'll run into Tower Master Ling this time? Emo Shuyao frowned. What Yili said might really happen. Now that he was healthy and had nothing to do, if he ran into Ling Taihan, he could forget about escaping. Although he also wanted to spar with a master like Ling Taihan. But Ling Taihan might not have the time to pay attention to me, Emo Shuyao said with a smile. Yili did not understand. Was there a better opponent than Emo Shuyao in this world? Emo Shuyao smiled and said, there might not be a better opponent, but, between an opponent and an enemy, which one do you think Ling Taihan will choose firstly? Enemy. Yili frowned. She counted the number of masters in the Jianghu that she remembered, and said with some confusion, Ling Taihan and Lei Jinting have a grudge? Emo Shuyao smiled faintly and said, Yili, haven't you noticed that Ling Taihan and Lei Jinting are both masters of Xiling? Logically speaking, their relationship should be better. But all these years, Ling Taihan would rather go to Dechu State to spar with masters than spar with Lei Jinting? Yili raised her eyebrows. Is it not because Lei Jinting's identity is special? No, it's because once they fight, it will definitely be a fight to the death. Before he has the confidence to kill Lei Jinting, Ling Taihan will not make a move, Emo Shuyao said calmly. Chapter 532. Excuse me, may I have a table with you? At the door, a scholar in a blue silk robe walked in. He glanced at the hall that was full in the blink of an eye and walked to where Emo Shuyao and Yili were sitting. Yili glanced at the lobby. The lobby of the inn wasn't big to begin with. There were only 7 or 8 tables in it, but it was already filled with people. Although there were empty seats, it was indeed a little difficult for such a scholarly person to squeeze in with those valiant and domineering people of the underworld. It was not a big deal. Glancing at Emo Shuyao, Yili said lightly, go ahead. The scholar felt that the man in front of him was not easy to get along with and did not have much hope. Unexpectedly, the woman in plain clothes agreed so easily. He was stunned for a moment and then hurriedly thanked her. Thank you, Mississippi. The corner of Yili's mouth twitched. She could clearly feel the rising chill of the man beside her. She looked up at the scholar and said, this is my husband. The scholar looked even more surprised. Yili was dressed in plain clothes, and her hair was not tied into a bun like a married woman. Her hair was casually tied up with a silver ribbon. Although she looked like she was 16 or 17 years old, there were many women in West Hill who were still unmarried at 17 years old. He thought that they were a pair of brother and sister traveling together. He did not expect them to be a couple. I'm really sorry, madam. What's your name? Emo Shuyao looked up at him and frowned slightly. After a while he said lightly, Yi. In just a moment the awkwardness and guilt on the scholar's face had completely disappeared. He looked at the two of them as if they were old friends who had known each other for many years. Brother Yi and madam are also here to participate in this year's martial arts assembly? Emo Shuyao said calmly, it's not really a participation. We're just here to have fun. The scholar clapped his hands and smiled, that's great. I also want to have fun. Why don't we go together? That's right. I am Ren Qining. This time Yili did not answer. She was indeed not familiar with Jianghu. Other than a few truly famous masters, she did not know of any other strange people. But at least he could see that Ren Qining was definitely not an ordinary scholar. Xiling was different from the Dechu state. Xiling was not a place filled with Confucian scholars. It was strange for a scholar to appear in such a place. Moreover, he had dragged them to the martial arts convention to join in the fun. Emo Shuyao put down his chopsticks and saw that Yili had finished eating. He stood up and pulled Yili away. He said indifferently, no need. We don't like to be disturbed by outsiders. He didn't care about Ren Qining's expression behind him and pulled Yili upstairs to rest. Shuyao. In the afternoon in the inn, Yili sat by the half-open window and read a travel book. The warm sunlight shone on her body, making her feel lazy and not want to move. Being hugged from behind, Yili put down her book and looked sideways at the man behind her. Emo Shuyao stood behind Yili and leisurely looked at the people coming and going on the street below. Yili thought for a moment and asked, that Ren Qining is probably not an ordinary person. Emo Shuyao lowered his head and gently tidied up the messy hair by her ear. He said softly, he is indeed not simple. But don't worry. There are always strange people in Jianghu. Yili should just go and watch the fun. Yili asked curiously, how is Ren Qining's martial arts? Yili could only see that Ren Qining was not a weak scholar without the strength to truss a chicken, but she could not see the depth of his martial arts. This proved that Ren Qining was better than her in terms of martial arts. Emo Shuyao frowned. He thought for a moment and said, in Jianghu he can at least be ranked in the top 10. Maybe even the top 5. I can't see which family he is from. In the end, Emo Shuyao was not a person of Jianghu. When Emo Shuyao was 14 years old, he shocked the world with his sword and became one of the 4 masters. After that, he spent most of his time and energy on the battlefield. He only knew the general situation of Jianghu. Yili helplessly smiled bitterly and said, what good luck. Just going out for a walk and we can meet such an expert. Letting Yili lean on his body, Emo Shuyao looked at her and said with a smile, don't mind him. If we ruin the fun for such a small matter, we might as well not go to the martial arts convention. You're not afraid that someone else will take the title of the 4 masters? Yili asked with a smile. Emo Shuyao disdainfully snorted and said, even if the title of the top 10 masters is taken by someone else, it doesn't change the fact that I's martial arts are higher than theirs. Not to mention, how many people in this world need I to personally take care of them? Whether I am an expert or not is just a matter of playing around when I was young. Yili leaned on his chest and sighed. Her heart was filled with sorrow and amusement. The title of an expert that the people of Jianghu scrambled for was nothing more than a joke in Emo Shuyao's eyes. She did not know what kind of expression those martial arts experts would have if they knew. I haven't seen the martial arts convention yet. Let's go see what it's like. Yili turned around and said, okay, we'll go wherever Li wants to go. Emo Shuyao replied. The martial arts convention naturally would not be held in this unknown small town. However, the location was not too far from this small town. It was 200 li away from the small town. It was the 4th largest city in Shilin and Cheng. It was 10 li away from Murong Manor. The next morning, Yili and Emo Shuyao prepared to leave for Encheng. As soon as they went downstairs, they saw Ren Qining, who was also preparing to pay the bill and leave. Unlike Emo Xuyao's indifference, Ren Qining was very happy to see the two of them. Madam Yi, what a coincidence. Are the two of you also preparing to leave? Emo Shuyao pulled Yili to pay the bill and walked out. Being so brazenly ignored, no matter how elegant Ren Qining was, he couldn't help but stiffen. However, he still caught up. Madam Yi. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, Emo Shuyao turned around and looked at him for a while before saying, young Master Ren, it's rare for me and my wife to go out on a leisurely trip. If you disturb other couples, you'll be kicked by the horse. As a result, Ren Qining, who was stunned, could only look on helplessly as Emo Shuyao hugged Yili and mounted the horse and left. He couldn't recover for a long time. After leaving the small town, Yili couldn't help but laugh when she thought of Ren Qining, who was left behind and looked as if he had swallowed a fly. Emo Shuyao leaned on Yili's shoulder. While casually controlling the speed and direction of the horse, he laughed softly and said, why are you laughing so happily, Madam Li? Yili shook her head repeatedly. Emo Shuyao naturally knew why she was laughing and didn't care. He said faintly, I'm afraid that Ren Qining's scheme isn't small. No matter why he insisted on going with us, we'll always feel uncomfortable with him following us. Yili nodded. She also didn't have any intention of going with others. What kind of place is Murong Manor? Famous Jianghu family? Murong Manor was indeed a place that often appeared in wuxia novels. Every time it was something like Jianghu's 8 great aristocratic families and so on. If she knew that she was going to get involved in Jianghu, she would have read all the reports about Jianghu from the dark department. Chapter 533. Emo Shuyao said, the Murong Manor is not a famous family in Jianghu. It is the richest family in the world. Yili was a bit surprised. The richest family in the world? Yili had seen rich people before. Feng Jiao's Feng family was one of the 4 richest families in Dechu State, but they did not dare to call themselves the richest family in the world. Then how rich was the Murong family? How does it compare to the Feng family? Mo Xiaoyao said, even 5 Feng families may not be able to compare to the Murong family's wealth. Even though she was mentally prepared, Yili was still a bit shocked. Mo Xiaoyao calmly explained, the Murong family and the Su family are the same. They are both famous families that have been around for hundreds of years. However, they are different from the Su family. The Su family is a scholarly family while the Murong family is a business family. Therefore, their status has always been inferior to the Su family. When Xiling and the Dechu state were still one, the Murong family was already the richest family in the world. Rumor has it that they have 3 mysterious gold veins in their hands. For many years, whether it was the Emperor Xiling's family or even the Dechu state's southern Zhao and northern tribes, they all wanted to obtain these veins, but no one succeeded. Rich enough to rival a country. For such a Murong family to be able to establish themselves in Xiling for so long, they must have something to rely on, Yili said. Although the status of merchants was the lowest among scholars, farmers, businessmen. However, when it came to food, clothing, housing, wealth, oil and salt, how could it be separated from business? Since ancient times, those who were truly rich enough to rival a country did not have a good ending. Mo Xiaoyao said, when Xiling was founded, the Murong family helped. After Xiling was established, the Murong family naturally received great benefits. Xiling's business has always been less prosperous than the Dechu state. One of the reasons is that the Murong family controls nearly 60% of Xiling's shops. Yili nodded. One family could control 60% of a country's business. Under such a monopoly, it was no wonder that Xiling's business was not doing well. If business wasn't easy to do, it would naturally be difficult for business to develop. After thinking for a bit, Yili smiled and said, so you're saying that the Emperor of Xiling's family has long disliked the Murong family? Mo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement and smiled, that's right. But even so, the Emperor of Xiling doesn't dare to rashly attack the Murong family. Firstly, the Murong family was a businessman unlike the Prince Ding mansion. If they were forced into a corner, no matter which country they sided with, the blow to Westhill would be fatal. In addition, it was said that the Murong family had an extremely powerful expert. The Murong family's head was worried that the brothers of the side branches would steal his grandson's property and status, so he ruthlessly killed all the brothers and descendants of the side branches. Who knew that the idiot fell into the pond and died when he was 9 years old. Because of this matter, the Murong family's head's vitality was greatly damaged. It is said that he hasn't seen outsiders for many years. It's natural that Yili doesn't know. Yili's heart moved and asked, doesn't that mean that in the future the Murong family's property will belong to the only remaining Miss Murong? How old is that Miss Murong this year? Mo Xiaoyao was startled. He thought for a moment and said, it is said that the Murong family's head's granddaughter was 3 years younger than the idiot who died prematurely. She should be 17 or 18 years old this year. Yili pursed her lips and smiled. She turned her head to look at Mo Xiaoyao and said with a smile, I don't know why. Why do I feel that this martial arts convention has something to do with that Miss Murong? Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and leaned against Yili's forehead. He laughed in a low voice, even if it has something to do with her, it has nothing to do with us. What Yili says isn't that right? Yili blinked her eyes and said, the Murong family's wealth is comparable to that of a country. Prince, are you really not moved? Mo Xiaoyao helplessly sighed and said, there is no other way. Who told I to marry a princess who, although not as rich as a country, is more precious than a mountain of gold and the Milky Way. Therefore I don't have the life to touch the Murong family's wealth. Yili narrowed her eyes and looked at him. She wanted to make an angry appearance, but she couldn't help but want to laugh. Prince, are you very regretful? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. Yili and gold cannot have both. I will only give up gold and marry Yili. According to what Yili said, if it is really like this, then this year's martial arts convention will be very lively. Let's quickly go and see the excitement. But, if the Murong family really wants to choose a husband for their granddaughter, why would they choose the martial arts convention? Most influential and famous people wouldn't go there, right? Could it be that the Murong family only wants to choose a person with strong martial arts? Who knows? Won't we know once we go and see? The wild horse caught from Nanzhao was not inferior to a precious treasure horse. It only took them half a day to travel 200 li. Emo Xiuyao and Yi Li directly entered En City. En City was the fourth largest city in Xiling. The two naturally did not have to suffer and found the best inn in the city to stay. This year's martial arts convention was indeed different from the previous ones. Although it was not time yet, the various inns in the city were already full of people. Not only were there Jianghu people, there were also many rich merchants and even influential people. The best rooms in the inn that Yi Li and Emo Xiuyao stayed in were all full. The two of them could only stay in the second-rate earth room. Chapter 534. Originally, with Emo Xiuyao's status, he didn't need to squeeze into an inn with other people. Yi Li and Emo Xiuyao had been sightseeing for more than a month, and they had only taken remote paths, so they didn't know that the Mu Rong family had already sent out invitations to all the heroes in the world to participate in the martial arts convention. As Prince Ding, Emo Xiuyao was naturally among them, and the invitations were sent to Li City in the northwest. Everyone who received the invitations had their accommodations arranged by the Mu Rong family. For this reason, the Mu Rong family had specially set aside a courtyard for these heroes to temporarily stay in. Emo Xiuyao had no intention of participating in this martial arts convention, so he naturally wouldn't reveal his identity and go to the Mu Rong family. He could only bring Yi Li to stay in an inn. En City's Qingyuan Inn was one of the best inns in the entire En City. Those who could stay here were naturally rich and powerful, and there were also some outstanding disciples of famous sects in Jianghu. Yi Li curiously looked at the well-dressed travelers coming and going. She tilted her head and asked Emo Xiuyao, who was leisurely drinking tea, "Is every martial arts convention this formal?" Emo Xiuyao curled his lips and said, "How is that possible? Most of the time, it's just a few experts from the previous convention who have arranged a place to compete. Once the news is released, the people of Jianghu will naturally go and join in the fun. The convention I went to was an exception. Ling Taihan went to challenge Genom of Gojoseon. I just happened to be playing nearby and went to join in the fun. I accidentally got into a fight. Speaking of which, the only person who actually participated in that convention was Mu Qingtsong. The so-called martial arts convention was actually so casual." Yi Li felt a bit disillusioned. However, this also proved how attractive the Mu Rong family was to the world. Downstairs, a few young and handsome youths disagreed and started fighting. Downstairs was suddenly in chaos. Yi Li coldly looked at the people below as they fought back and forth, wanting to kill each other. She didn't have the slightest intention of interfering. Not long after, the victor was decided. The loser's hand strength was severed, and he would never be able to practice the sword again. The winner was naturally proud of himself. He laughed contemptuously and said, "You should take a look at yourself. How dare you covet Miss Murong?" His words immediately made it clear that these people were not here for the so-called martial arts assembly, but for Lady Murong, or rather for the Murong family. Before he could finish being complacent, a hidden weapon shot out of nowhere and hit his chest. The youth who was still complacent a moment ago immediately fell to the ground. Who would release such an idiot to harm others and themselves? Yi Li frowned and said softly. The fight below was started by the youth who had been hit by the hidden weapon. He had crippled the other's hand, but he had also lost his life. That is Sun Jianwei, the eldest son of the famous Sun family of Dechu State. A refined and smiling voice sounded from behind. Yi Li turned around and saw Ren Qining smiling as he stood at the top of the stairs looking at the two people through the window. Meeting Ren Qining again at the same inn, Yi Li wasn't too surprised. However, this also proved that this young Master Ren wasn't as harmless as he appeared to be. His family background was definitely not ordinary. However, this wasn't enough to make Emo Xiuyao and Yi Li take him seriously. To put it bluntly, in this world, other than the imperial family of each country, no one else had the qualifications to make Emo Xiuyao pay attention to them. Therefore, when he saw Ren Qining, Emo Xiuyao's attitude was still cold and distant. Young Master Ren was a bit gloomy about this. He had always been high and mighty since he was young. In addition, his warm and gentle appearance made people unconsciously feel close to him. Who would have thought that there would be such a stubborn person? If it wasn't too rude, Ren Qining would have asked Emo Xiuyao if he had offended him in any way. "Yi, are you also here to participate in the martial arts convention?" Ren Qining didn't seem to notice Emo Xiuyao's cold attitude and laughed loudly. His voice wasn't soft, so when he said this, Most of the people on the second floor focused their attention on Imo Shuyao. Their eyes were filled with vigilance and hostility. After all, not to mention Imo Shuyao's hidden identity in martial arts. Just his handsome appearance alone was enough to make most men hostile to him. Imo Shuyao raised his eyelids as if he didn't notice the hostile gazes of the crowd. He smiled faintly. We just happened to pass by. My wife wanted to join in the fun. But, with young Master Ren's status, you should be staying in the Murong family's courtyard. Why are you also here at the inn? Hearing this, the hostility in the crowd immediately disappeared. Wasn't it true? There was a beautiful and elegant woman sitting next to this handsome young master. Although she wasn't as rich as the Murong family, this woman was still beautiful and graceful. Her temperament was outstanding, and it was obvious that she came from a scholarly family. The Murong family's young miss might not be able to surpass this woman in terms of appearance and temperament. Maybe this young master only liked beauties and not money? On the other hand, the young master wearing the blue silk robe was also outstanding. It was obvious that he came from an extraordinary background. Most importantly, he was still single. Ren Qining's eyes flashed and he smiled. Brother Yi is joking. With my status, how could I be qualified to stay in the Murong family's courtyard? I'm just here to join in the fun like Brother Yi. Is it convenient for me to sit with you? Imo Shuyao declined to comment. Ren Qining took it as an agreement and sat down across from the two. As they drank tea, Imo Shuyao didn't want to talk to Ren Qining. The atmosphere at the table was a bit cold. Yili picked up the teacup and took a sip. She casually said, the martial arts convention this time is a bit strange. Wasn't it said that the previous martial arts conventions were set by the experts from the previous convention? Could it be that the experts chose the Murong family's martial arts competition this time? Generally, the experts would choose a more remote and famous mountain. It was said that the most powerful person chose the peak of the snowy mountain in the north of the Western Tomb. That time, the number of participants was the least because many people couldn't even reach the peak of the snowy mountain. Ren Qining smiled and said, Madam, do you know who the top 4 experts in Jianghu are? Yili nodded and said, I've heard a little about them. Ren Qining smiled and said, speaking of which, these 4 aren't experts from the previous convention. They are experts from the convention before that. In fact, the previous martial arts convention couldn't be held at all. Yili asked curiously, what do you mean? Ren Qining said, during the previous martial arts convention, Prince Ding couldn't participate because of his injury. Pavilion Master Ling of the Yanwang Chamber also couldn't participate because of Prince Ding's absence. The Genom King of Gojoseon of Western Tomb was busy with state affairs, so Mu Qingcong was the only expert in that convention. However, none of the people who went to challenge Mu Qingcong could beat him or even tie with him. The martial arts convention, which was supposed to last 3 days, ended in half a day. Yili glanced at Imo Shuyao secretly and smiled. There's such a thing? Ren Qining sighed and said, isn't that so? Seriously speaking, the ranking of the experts in Jianghu hasn't changed for 18 years. Naturally, there are many rising stars who can't help but want to try their skills. What does this have to do with the Murong family? Yili raised her eyebrows and asked. The Murong family was a merchant family and had nothing to do with the people of Jianghu.